where the soul gently wanders. You may be lying in bed now, letting the hush of the evening gather around you like the folds of a warm, ancient robe. The day has dimmed. Your breath is slow, and the quiet settles deeper, like mist over a forgotten field. Tonight, we drift softly through the beliefs that shaped how civilizations imagined the afterlife. Not with fear, but with wonder. Not to chase certainty, but to find rest in the questions. These aren't tales of endings. They are quiet reflections of continuity, how the soul, in its many forms and names, steps gently from one realm to another. Some believed in judgment, others in release, some in return, but all held the same truth. Death was never the last word. From the sands of Egypt to the mountains of Tibet, from the still waters of Japan to the icy myths of the North, the afterlife has always been more than mystery. It is memory, meaning, a map of how people lived and what they hoped would remain. So rest now. Let your mind loosen its grip on the day. You do not need to hold on. You are not alone in your wandering. The soul has always wandered, and tonight it drifts again. The soul beyond the veil, the moment of death, has never been seen as silence alone. For thousands of years, across dry plains and forested valleys, across islands and mountains, people have paused at the threshold, not to mark an ending, but to look past it. The body, yes, it rests, but the soul, they believed, continues. The soul was never treated lightly. It wasn't simply the spark of life, or the mind's ghost. It was presence, memory, breath that lingers. And for many, it did not vanish when the body fell still. Instead, it stepped out as if parting a thin veil, and moved into another layer of the world. In early tribal communities, death was an event not just of sorrow, but of transition. Among the San of southern Africa, rituals involved guiding the spirit toward ancestral lands, not a place of punishment, but of reunion. The soul was thought to return to the Great Circle, to live again through memory and wind and kin in ancient Mesopotamia. They believed in a shadowy underworld called Kur, a dim, dusty place where the dead drank from clay and lingered beyond sight. It was not joyful, nor cruel. It was continuation, a reflection of the living world, only faded. What mattered most was that the soul endured, present in another form, on another plane. The Egyptians held perhaps one of the most elaborate visions of the soul's journey. To them, the soul was not a single unit, but a composite. The BAA and the ACH, each part serving a purpose. The Ka was life force, remaining close to the tomb. The BA was personality, free to roam. And the OC was the transfigured soul, the part that reached the stars. Death was not a moment, it was a process. A weighing of the heart against the feather of mat, a sacred judgment. But also a hope, for if one passed, they became eternal. In these beliefs, death was never empty. It was structured, sacred, filled with rites and meaning. There were spells, amulets, songs, not to prevent death, but to shape what followed. Further east, in Vedic and Hindu thought, the soul Atman was eternal, bound in a cycle of rebirth. Death was simply a passing wave. The soul moved on, carried by karma like wind over a river. Liberation came only when the soul no longer clung to illusion. Until then, it returned, and returned again, wearing new bodies, like garments. The moment the soul left was not feared, but seen as a shift in form, a realignment with the laws of the universe. In Japan, the Shinto view of the spirit, the Rikon, suggested it lingered for a time after death, close to family and familiar places. It needed ritual, prayer, and remembrance to pass fully into the ancestral realm. If forgotten, it could become restless, but if honored, it watched over the living, quietly, like fog among the trees. There's a gentleness in this view, that the soul is not cast out, but accompanied, that the dead remain near, not to haunt, but to witness. In many cultures, from the Pacific Islands to the Andes, this nearness is not eerie. It's comforting. The idea that those who've passed are just beyond the veil, still listening. Among the Celts, the soul was deeply tied to the natural world. Trees, rivers, stones, all were believed to carry spirit. Death meant return to the land, to the earth's rhythm. Their concept of the other world wasn't dreadful. It was green, golden, fertile. A land of peace and light, reached not through violence, but through balance. For the Celts, as with many indigenous peoples, the soul was not locked in the body. It flowed through the world, and when life ended, it did not disappear. It rejoined what it had always been part of. Even in early Christianity, before doctrine hardened, the soul's journey was often envisioned with tenderness. Writings from desert mystics speak of the soul rising gently, guided by angels, passing through realms of air and light. In Orthodox tradition, there are prayers offered in the days following death, not to control, but to accompany the soul. A liturgy of remembering. What echoes through all these visions is not terror, but care. The moment the soul leaves the body is not abandoned. It is watched, blessed, imagined, again and again, through song, rite, silence, and always there is. The belief, however, shaped that something continues, that the self, the spark, the essence, does not vanish. It transforms. It moves. Some believed the soul returned to the ancestors, others, that it was reborn in a child, others, still, that it wandered through dreamlike realms before dissolving into divine presence. But rarely was death seen as erasure. To most ancient cultures, death was a threshold, and the soul, a traveler. You begin to feel the weight of that idea now, that you, too, are part of a lineage of wonder, that your questions are not new, that someone long ago, sitting by firelight or beneath temple stone, wondered the same thing you do. What becomes of me when this body no longer moves? And in their wondering, they lit candles, wrote verses, painted tombs, whispered blessings. They made meaning, not to escape the unknown, but to soften it. The soul, they believed, does not fall. It floats. It drifts. It steps through, and perhaps, just perhaps, it is not so far. Just beyond the veil. Duat, the silent journey through Egypt, beneath the still arc of Egyptian sky, where the stars rest like inscriptions in the dark. Death was not a fall. It was a passage. To the ancient Egyptians, what lay beyond life was not chaos, but a journey through order, a sacred order, one shaped by gods, guarded by truth, and lit by the silent glow of stars reflected in the Nile. The realm they envisioned was called Duat, neither sky nor earth. Not quite underworld, not quite paradise. It existed, somewhere in between, a hidden dimension through which every soul had to pass. No one could skip it. Not kings, not farmers, not scribes. The path was for all, winding, perilous, but filled with meaning. Duat was not imagined as a singular place. It was a series of regions, gates, rivers, and caverns. Some were ruled by serpents. Others watched over by gods with the heads of lions or jackals. Time bent within it. Hours were counted differently. It was said that Ra, the sun god, passed through Duat each night, swallowed by the sky at dusk and reborn at dawn. In that nightly cycle, the Egyptians saw death mirrored in nature. Each soul, like Ra, would journey through shadow before emerging into light. But the journey was not automatic. It required preparation, both spiritual and ritual. The Egyptians devoted enormous care to burial, not out of superstition, but to equip the soul. Tombs were not simply places to lay the dead. They were portals, entrances to the next world. Spells from the Book of the Dead were inscribed on coffins, walls, and scrolls, not to ward off evil, but to guide the deceased. The book was not truly a book. Its ancient name was the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It spoke of transformation. It mapped the stages of Duat. It named the guardians and the passwords required to pass. In this journey, the heart was the center of judgment. The Egyptians believed that the heart, not the brain, held the record of a person's deeds. It remembered everything. And at the climax of the journey, in the Hall of Two Truths, the heart would be weighed. This was the test of Mat. Mat was more than a goddess. She was the principle of cosmic order, truth, balance, justice. Her symbol was the ostrich feather, pure, delicate, and exact. When the soul reached this final hall, it stood before Osiris, god of the dead. The heart was placed on one side of the scale, Mat's feather on the other. If the heart was light, unburdened by lies, cruelty, or injustice, the soul could pass. It became a transfigured being, allowed to dwell among the blessed in the field of reeds, an eternal mirror of the best of earthly life. There, the soul could harvest without toil, sail without storm, rest without fear. But if the heart was heavy, it was fed to Amit, the devourer, part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus. The soul was not tormented, nor punished forever. It simply ceased to be. That was the true fear, not fire, not pain, but erasure. You imagine that moment now, the hush of the hall, the glint of the feather, the weight of your own heart, not as muscle, but as memory. What would it hold? What would it reveal? Throughout Egyptian history, kings built elaborate tombs, not to preserve ego, but to prepare for this trial. The pyramids were not monuments to power, they were stairways, angled to catch the sun's rising path. The Valley of the Kings, hidden in desert stone, echoed with the names of pharaohs who believed they would walk again, not among men, but among gods. And yet this journey was not reserved for royalty. The Book of the Dead was adapted for common people. Priests prepared spells for anyone who could afford them. Amulets were buried with children, merchants, even animals. There was a deep democracy to death. All were judged. All were weighed. All were offered the chance to pass. In Duat, the soul moved through 12 gates, one for each hour of the night. Each gate had a name. Each hour brought new challenges. Serpents with flaming eyes, lakes of fire, silent guardians who asked for names not of the person, but of the stars, the rivers, the divine laws. Knowledge was power, and remembrance was survival, but fear was not the dominant emotion here. Reverence was. The Egyptians saw Duat not as a place of punishment, but of purification. A soul might struggle, it might falter, but if it was prepared, if it had lived with respect, and entered death with ritual, it could endure. Ra's own nightly voyage was a model for this. Each evening, as the sun set, Ra entered Duat aboard his celestial boat. In the deepest hour of night, he faced the serpent Apophis, a force of chaos. With the help of other gods, Ra overcame it, and with dawn, he was reborn. In that myth, Egyptians saw the pattern of death and rebirth. They saw the possibility that the soul, too, could emerge from night. You begin to sense what they felt, that death was not the opposite of life, but its continuation in another rhythm, that truth mattered, that the heart must be light to pass, and so they lived accordingly. Justice was not just a civic duty, it was a spiritual necessity. To steal, to lie, to kill, these were not merely crimes, they were weights, burdens on the heart that would tip the scale. This belief shaped not just funerals, but daily life. The temples, the festivals, the hymns to Isis and Thoth, all were reminders. Life was brief, but the soul's journey was long. One must prepare in the quiet corridors of ancient tombs. You can still read the words they wrote to the dead. May your name be spoken. May your soul sail safely. These were not poetic hopes. They were practical blessings. For the name, too, was part of the soul. To be remembered was to endure. Even now, Duat is not a forgotten word. It lingers in the art, in the desert winds, in the shape of Egyptian belief that saw beauty not only in life, but in what comes after, and in that vast, echoing realm beneath. The stars, the soul still moves slowly, silently through the gates of night, toward balance, toward light, toward whatever waits beyond the final weighing. Yomi, the shadowed land of Japan. In the spiritual traditions of Japan, death does not roar, it does not blaze, it does not rise in judgment, it fades. Yomi, the land of the dead, is not a heaven, nor is it a hell. It is a place of stillness, a shadowed echo of the living world, dimmer, quieter, distant. In the oldest Shinto texts, it is described not as a realm of punishment, but of separation, a realm beneath the earth, veiled in twilight. Once entered, it cannot be left unchanged. Unlike other mythologies that offer fire or paradise, reward or ruin, the Japanese afterlife offers neither. It offers silence, a return to something older than memory. The first mention of Yomi appears in the Kojiki, Japan's earliest written chronicle, compiled in the 8th century. There, the myth of Izanami and Izanagi forms the foundation of death's meaning. They are the primal couple deities who shape the islands of Japan, sea by sea, mountain by mountain. In time, Izanami gives birth to the gods of fire, earth, and water, but in bearing the fire god, her body is burned. She dies, and descends into Yomi. Izanagi, heartbroken, follows her. He finds her in the shadowed realm, but she warns him. It is too late. She has eaten the food of Yomi, and now she belongs to it. Still, he insists. He lights a fire to see her face, and recoils. Her form is no longer divine. Her body is decaying. Maggots crawl, rot spreads. She is no longer the Izanami he knew. In terror, he flees. She chases him, furious. But at the edge of both worlds, he seals the passage with a boulder. The path is closed. The dead must stay in Yomi. The living must remain in this world. This myth does not portray death as evil. It is natural. It is sacred. But it draws a clear boundary. Yomi becomes a place apart, not cruel, but irreversible. In Shinto belief, purity is not moral. It is physical, spiritual, elemental. Death, because it brings decay, is considered a form of impurity. Not wrong, not sinful. Simply out of balance with the realm of the living. And so, the rituals of death in Japan are not about sin or salvation. They are about separation, about cleansing, about helping the spirit pass gently, and ensuring the living are not pulled too close to the realm of stillness. When someone dies, they do not ascend or fall. They return to Yomi, a place beneath the roots of the world, where light does not reach, and sound fades slowly. But this is not a place of pain. There is no fire, no torment, no judgment. Instead, there is the hush of ancestral memory, the weight of lives once lived. Souls rest in Yomi, as if sleeping in stone. Shinto teaches presence. The sacred is not elsewhere. It is here, in trees, in wind, in water, in flame. The gods, or kami, dwell in the world, not outside it. And so, the afterlife, too, is not something to long for. It is distant. It is final. The focus remains on this life. Even now, many Japanese rituals honor the dead, not by speaking of what comes after, but by remembering what came before. Ancestors are revered, names are spoken, offerings are left not to rescue souls, but to maintain connection. The Bon Festival, held each summer, is a time when the spirits of ancestors are believed to return briefly. Lanterns are lit to guide them. Food is placed at altars. Dances are performed. But when the festival ends, lanterns float down rivers to lead the spirits back. It is a gentle exchange, not a plea, not a fear, a rhythm. You begin to feel the tone of it now. The way Yomi is not framed as reward or consequence, but as return. A return to something mute, slow, unchanging. Like the quiet beneath a forest floor, Buddhism would later blend with these native beliefs, offering more layered visions of afterlife, rebirth, karma, cycles. But Yomi, in its older form, remains unmoving. A spiritual backdrop that shaped how the Japanese regarded death for centuries. And perhaps it offers something unfamiliar, the idea that death does not need to be explained or conquered, that the soul is not punished, not tested, not even transformed, only placed in a realm where sound does not travel, and longing fades, where the living cannot follow, but can still remember. In this worldview, grief is not overcome, it is absorbed, like mist into stone. Yomi is not feared, but it is not embraced either. It is accepted as the natural end of a finite life, and in that acceptance, there is peace. Not a shining reward, not a fiery reckoning, just silence, and the soft memory of those who once walked the earth. The Fields of Aaru, Egyptian paradise revisited, in ancient Egypt. Paradise was not high above the clouds, it was not distant or surreal. It was a return to the land, to the river, to the rhythm of a life made whole again. The ancient Egyptians called it Uru, the field of reeds, a place that looked very much like the Nile Valley, but cleaner, gentler, eternal, lush, ordered, abundant. It was the reflection of an ideal earth, not an escape from it. A land where the soul could live again, not as a ghost, nor a memory, but as a whole being. But before one could enter, there was the journey. When a person died, their soul began a long and sacred process. The body was mummified, not only to preserve the flesh, but to protect the spirit, the ka, so it could recognize its form. Then came the weighing of the heart, in the Book of the Dead. This moment is described with great care. The heart, thought to hold the essence of a person's actions, was placed on a scale. On the other side, a feather, the feather of Mat, goddess of truth, balance, and order. If the heart was heavier than the feather, the soul was devoured by Ammit, a creature part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile. That soul would cease to exist. But if the heart balanced, or was lighter, the journey continued. The soul passed through gates, faced guardians, spoke passwords. It recited spells and names remembered from life. The Book of the Dead was not just scripture, it was a guidebook, a map through the unknown dot, and beyond the last threshold. If all went well, lay Aaru. Imagine now the edge of that field. There is no throne waiting, no clouds, no harps. Instead, a horizon of golden reeds sways in gentle wind. A quiet river runs through fertile earth. Fruit trees bloom without end. The sun glows softly, not to burn, but to warm. In Aaru, the soul farms again. But this farming is not toil. It is not punishment. It is peace, a return to the most sacred rhythms of life, sowing, tending, harvesting. In ancient Egypt, too, live near the Nile was a gift. Its flood nourished the soil. Its waters carried both life and the dead. To work its banks was sacred duty. Aaru mirrored this perfection. Here, fields never failed. Crops grew without blight. Time did not decay the body. Seasons did not bring hardship. The work continued, but the burden was gone. The soul might plow the fields, gather grain, tend cattle, but with joy, not labor. It was believed that the righteous would even receive Ushabti, small figurines, buried with them in life, who would come alive in the afterlife to assist them, helpers in eternity, should the soul grow weary. This was not idleness, it was harmony. You begin to feel the meaning behind this paradise. It is not a reward in the way Western heavens are often imagined. It is not pleasure without purpose. It is balance restored. To the ancient Egyptian, this was the highest blessing. Not to escape the world, but to remain in its best form. To continue a life lived rightly, without fear, without loss. And this vision shaped everything from burial practices to architecture, from ritual to governance. Pharaohs built vast tombs, not for grandeur, but to prepare for Aaru. Priests recited long incantations to guide the soul safely through the underworld. Families left offerings of food and drink not to bribe the gods, but to nourish the departed on their way. The land of the dead, called Duat, was not separate from the world of the living. It was a deeper layer, interwoven, unseen. The soul did not rise above, nor fall below. It passed through, and if found worthy, emerged into Aaru. This idea offered a kind of comfort. Death was not the end, nor a punishment. It was a journey back to the source, a test of truth, and a homecoming. Even in daily life, this belief created an ethic of harmony. To live in accordance with Mat, truth, balance, justice, was not only moral, it was practical. It prepared the soul. And so, paradise was earned, not through belief, but through balance, not through worship alone, but through deeds, kindness, honesty, reverence for the natural order, and always, the image of Aaru stood quietly behind it all, not as a bribe, but as a reminder that life was sacred, that the land was sacred, that the two would one day meet again. You imagine now the stillness of it, reeds parting in warm wind, birds calling gently overhead, the earth dark and soft beneath your hands. No judgment follows, no fear lingers, only the soft continuation of all that was once good. This was the Egyptian dream of eternity, not to be crowned, not to be exalted, but to be whole, to live again in a place that needed nothing more. Naraka and the wheel, Hindu visions of rebirth. In the Vedic worldview, there is no true ending. Death is not final. It is not a gate that closes, nor a line that breaks. It is a moment, a pause, in the turning of something far older, far greater. The soul, or Atman, continues. It moves in circles. This is samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. For millennia, Hindu philosophy has described this endless wheel, a motion not driven by fate, but by karma, the quiet consequence of every action, thought, and intent. Goodness echoes forward, so does harm, and the soul follows the path it has laid for itself, life after life. But between these lives, there is Naraka. Naraka is not hell in the Western sense. It is not eternal, nor is it a place of divine wrath. It is a realm of reflection, sometimes fierce, sometimes brief, always purposeful. According to ancient texts like the Garuda Purana, Naraka is a domain beneath the earthly plane. There, the soul experiences the results of its karma, especially when that karma is heavy with cruelty, dishonesty, or imbalance. The number and nature of these Narakas vary. Some scriptures speak of 4, others list 21, and some, like the Vishnu Purana, describe a full 28, each with a distinct purpose. They are not punishment, they are purification. A soul that has stolen may wander a realm where hands are bound. One that has harmed others may feel a mirrored pain, not to suffer, but to understand. Each Naraka is tailored to the lessons the soul could not learn in life, and always, there is an end. No soul remains there forever. Once the karmic debt is released, once the echo has settled, the soul moves on, reborn, given a new chance, a new form, another turning of the wheel. This belief offers something rare, a universe without final damnation. Even the darkest corner of Naraka is temporary. Even the most tangled karma can be unraveled with time. The Hindu cosmology holds this truth close, that existence is layered and vast, but never cruel for cruelty's sake. And so, a person's life becomes more than just one story. It becomes a thread in an immense fabric, woven through lifetimes. Actions, intentions. You begin to feel the rhythm of this idea, how one life leads quietly into another, how even suffering can serve a higher unfolding, how death is simply the space between notes in a long, sacred song. In some stories, Yama, the god of death, governs Naraka. He sits in judgment, not with fury, but with clarity. His messengers escort the soul. His scribes read from the Chitragupta, the celestial record of one's deeds. But Yama is not feared as a devil. He is a guardian of order, a necessary part of balance. Without consequence, there is no growth. Without reflection, there is no understanding. The Mahabharata, one of Hinduism's greatest epics, offers a striking example in its final chapters. The righteous king Yudhishthira reaches the gates of heaven, but before entering, he is shown Naraka, and there, he sees his loved ones suffering. He chooses to stay with them rather than ascend alone. It is only then revealed this was a final test, a vision. His compassion is proven, and heaven opens. Even at the highest levels of Dharma, the soul must pass through confrontation. It must see clearly, and it must choose rightly, even when it costs comfort. This is the essence of Naraka, not horror, but confrontation, not cruelty, but correction. Its flames are not eternal. They burn only until understanding dawns, and this understanding, when it comes, releases the soul. It may return to earth, as a human, an animal, a being of another realm, or, with enough clarity, it may escape the wheel entirely. This is moksha, liberation, freedom from rebirth, unity with Brahman, the source of all being, the stillness, beyond movement. But moksha is rare. It is not achieved by accident. Most souls continue circling, living, learning, forgetting, and returning, and so Naraka, too, remains. A necessary space in the cosmic design, a place where even mistakes are met with purpose, where the soul is reminded, gently or fiercely, of the nature of its path. You picture it now, not as a firelit prison, but as a chamber of echoes. One voice replayed again and again, until it is understood, until it softens, until it lets go. And when it does, the wheel turns again. This time, the soul may emerge as a healer, or a child, or a teacher, or a bird on a quiet lake. Each life is a chance. Each action, a seed. The law of karma is precise, but not unkind. And as the Bhagavad Gita teaches, as a person sheds worn-out garments and wears new ones, so the soul sheds the body and enters new forms. Nothing is ever truly lost. Even in Naraka, the soul is not forsaken. It is only passing through. Elysium and the Isles of Blessed Sleep. In the ancient Greek mind, death did not end the soul. It rearranged it. Life was fleeting, but not meaningless. What a person chose, how they lived, what they left behind, all of it echoed into the afterlife. When death arrived, it came without cruelty. The soul was guided, carried gently across the river Styx by Charon, the ferryman. For a coin placed beneath the tongue, the journey could begin. And on the far shore, the realm of Hades waited there. Most souls wandered in shadow, quiet, faded, not punished, just distant from the warmth of life. These were the asphodel fields, a neutral resting place, soft, but dim. But for a rare few, there was something else, a destination of light and peace, a realm apart from sorrow. They called it Elysium. The poets spoke of it in hushed verses. A meadow touched by no winter, a sky without storm, the breeze always mild, the ground soft with flowers that never withered. Music drifted from unseen lyres, gentle laughter moved through the trees, and time itself seemed to loosen, like the body slipping into deep sleep. This was no heaven of gold and glory. It was simpler, quieter. It was rest earned through a life of grace, courage, or divine favor. In Homer's time, Elysium was described as a far-off land at the edge of the earth, a place ruled not by Hades, but by Kronos, the old god of time, resting in calm after his fall. Only the most blessed could enter, heroes who had pleased the gods, those descended from the divine, or mortals whose goodness shone like flame in the darkness. Later writers expanded the vision, Pindar Hesiod, and Virgil added layers to the myth. They described the Isles of the Blessed, a cluster of islands beyond the Western Sea, bathed in golden light. Some said they were the final home for those who had been reborn 3 times, and lived purely in each life. Others believed it was Elysium itself that had shifted, now floating across the ocean, always just beyond reach. And so, the Greek afterlife split in quiet symmetry, the shadowy plains of ordinary souls, and the luminous retreat of the worthy. But even in its peace, Elysium was not loud. It was never a reward shouted across the heavens. It was soft, subtle, a place where the soul could finally stop striving. You can almost feel it. Now a warm wind over a quiet field, a world where the body no longer aches, where the heart carries no weight, where memory returns, but pain does not, where the soul lies down, not in sleep that forgets, but in sleep that heals. To the Greeks, the road to Elysium was shaped not only by birth or favor, but by virtue. Some philosophers believed that wisdom, justice, and restraint shaped the soul more than lineage ever could. The Orphic mysteries taught of purification, that the soul must cleanse itself of earthly attachments to escape the endless cycle of rebirth. That Elysium was not simply given, it was grown into Duat. The Pythagoreans, too, saw the soul as eternal, bound to reincarnation unless it reached a level of harmony so complete that it no longer needed to return. In these teachings, Elysium was not just a location, it was a state of balance. And so, even in ancient Greece, there were echoes of something larger, the idea that death was not the enemy, but a passage, that the soul carried a memory of its past lives, that a deeper peace awaited those who chose rightly, who acted with honor, who sought the good quietly, without needing glory. These stories shaped how people lived, and how they prepared to die. In Virgil's Aeneid, the hero descends into the underworld and glimpses Elysium. He finds it full of music and dancing. The air glows with a strange brightness. The souls here do not suffer. They do not struggle. They are not lost. They have arrived. He sees the poets, the philosophers, the just rulers, all resting beneath silver trees, speaking softly. There is no fear in them, only a stillness that seems to stretch beyond time. You begin to understand, gently, what Elysium meant. It was not a prize to be hoarded. It was a whisper of what peace could feel like, if lived toward steadily. Even today, the word lingers. Elysian, it carries with it the sense of calm beyond reach, a garden beyond storms, a dream of what might await those who have made peace with themselves and with the world. The Greeks gave the world many things: reason, myth, language, law. But in Elysium, they gave something quieter, a vision of rest, not one born from conquest, but from character. And perhaps that's the secret buried in the soil of their myths, that paradise isn't given, it's remembered. Not earned like a trophy, but discovered like an old truth, waiting beneath the noise, one soul at a time, drifting toward a shore where sorrow never arrives. Xibalba, the Maya underworld of trials and dawn, deep beneath the jungle floor, beyond the reach of sun and breath, the Maya imagined a world of shadows, not a place of torment, but of testing, not a prison, but a path. They called it the place of fear. But for the Maya, fear was not the end. It was part of the passage. When death came, it did not close the story. Instead, it opened a new one. The soul left the body and began a long descent. Through caves, through earth, through sacred waters, it journeyed downward, toward a realm filled with challenges. Xibalba was not a single place. It was many layers deep, a dark and shifting world ruled by the death gods, 12 in number, but led by 2. Hun came, 1 death, and Vukub came, 7 death. These lords ruled not with cruelty, but with trials. They did not feast on souls. They tested them. The soul would enter through a cave. Real ones still stand today in Guatemala and Belize, marked with ancient carvings, believed to be portals. The living would leave offerings here. Cacao. Obsidian. How they gifts to ease the passage of the dead. Once inside, the soul faced the trials of Xibalba. There were rivers of blood, where the waters ran thick and warm. There were rivers of pus, where stepping forward meant surrendering pride. There were houses of darkness, where no flame could burn. Houses of knives, where blades whirled in silence. A house of cold, where frost crept into bone. A house of jaguars, where the breath of the great cats pulsed through the air. Each trial was not meant to destroy. It was meant to awaken. The Maya believed that death was not just an ending. It was a mirror. In Xibalba, the soul met its own limits and its own truth. This belief is most clearly seen in the story of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Zabalunk. They are born of mystery, children of a god who died in Xibalba before they were born. Their story begins, not in triumph, but in absence. And yet, they rise. When they learn of their father's death, they do not mourn him passively. They follow his path. They descend into Xibalba, not to perish, but to transform there. The lords of death challenge them again and again, with deception, with riddles, with the deadly trials that broke others before them. But the twins do not break. They play the game differently. Where others bowed, they trick. Where others failed, they adapt. They allow themselves to be defeated, even to die, but only so they can return stronger. In the end, they outwit the lords of death entirely. They sacrifice themselves and rise anew. One becomes the sun, the other, the moon. This is the soul of Maya belief, that death is a cycle, that descent leads to rebirth, that even in darkness, something sacred moves forward. The story of the hero twins is carved into the walls of temples, painted on pottery, etched in the codices that survived destruction. It is not just myth, it is instruction. Not to pass through Xibalba is to undergo the trials of spirit, to face illusions, to resist fear, to become more than what you were in life. The Maya saw this journey not as punishment, but purification, a return to the cosmic order. Life came from death, just as crops came from the ground. Maize, their sacred plant, was reborn each season only after falling. In fact, the Maya maize god himself was said to die and rise again, traveling through Xibalba before emerging as the source of nourishment and life. He, too, was part of the cycle. And so, when someone died, their burial followed the pattern. Bodies were often laid with maize in the mouth, a final seed, a promise that life would return. Caves were not feared. They were honored, called Xibalba B roads, to sacred spaces where priests conducted ceremonies, lighting torches in pitch darkness, speaking to the ancestors in whispers. Here, the veil thinned. You imagine it now, walking down into cool stone, the air thick with incense, shadows flickering, on walls carved by time. Beneath your feet, the bones of kings. Above the breath of the gods. The trials were not only for the dead. In ritual, the living mirrored the underworld journey, bloodletting, fasting, isolation, each a symbolic descent. The goal was not suffering for its own sake, but spiritual clarity, cleansing the path of the hero twins, walked in fragments by all who sought transformation. Even the calendar told the story. The Maya kept time with sacred precision, days, months, centuries, all woven into a cosmic rhythm. Certain days aligned with the underworld, others with the heavens. The journey of the sun across the sky mirrored the soul's journey through Xibalba. At night. The sun was believed to descend into that very realm, to face trials and darkness before rising again at dawn. So each morning was not just a return of light. It was proof that death had been faced. and overcome. You begin to feel the weight of these beliefs, not heavy, but grounding. The idea that fear, darkness, even suffering, are not ends. They are steps, necessary ones, and perhaps that is why Xibalba is remembered not as a hell, but as a place of becoming. It holds pain, yes, confusion, silence, but it also holds the memory of the hero twins, rising as sun and moon. It holds the breath of the maize god, pushing upward through soil. It holds the prayers of the living, whispered into caves, carried down by water. In that darkness, something always moves, something always returns, and in this way, the Maya did not fear death. They walked toward it with stories, with rituals, with the quiet trust that the soul, if it endured, would emerge changed, better, freer, lighter. Maybe you begin to feel it now, the rhythm of descent and return, the slow turning of a world where no ending is final, only another beginning, shaped in shadow and lifted into light. Barzakh, the gentle waiting in Islamic thought, in the stillness after death. But before the resurrection, there is Barzakh, a boundary, a barrier, a space between two worlds. In Islamic thought, Barzakh is not punishment, nor reward. It is not heaven, it is not hell. It is the in-between, where the soul waits. The word Barzakh comes from the Quran itself. In Arabic, it means a partition, a veil, a subtle division that separates the world of the living from the unseen realm of the dead. And yet, it is not emptiness. Barzakh is described as a place of awareness, where the soul remains conscious, where deeds are remembered, and where time unfolds, not in minutes or hours, but in meaning. When a person dies, their body is returned to the earth. Their name fades from the mouths of others, but the soul does not vanish. Instead, it enters this quiet interval Barzakh, where it begins the wait for Yom al-Qiyamah, the day of standing, when all souls will be resurrected and judged. Some imagine this interval as a long sleep, others as a gentle resting, but many Islamic scholars and traditions teach that the soul experiences something of its coming destiny, a reflection, not yet final, shaped by the weight of its earthly life. For the righteous, Barzakh is said to be wide and filled with light. A breeze from paradise may reach them, fragrance, peace, the memory of good prayers. For others, the space may feel tighter, dimmer, shadows echo where truth was denied. The body may lie still, but the soul reflects, and yet even here, divine mercy is near. This realm is not closed, not forgotten, it is held. According to Hadith, the recorded sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when a person is buried, two angels approach, Munkar and Nakir. They question the soul gently. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? The soul responds not with memorized words, but with the truth of its life. The answers do not come from the tongue. They come from the heart. Those who lived with sincerity, even if imperfectly, are said to be comforted in Barzakh. The grave becomes a garden. The soul is told to rest, to wait. The day of judgment is still far, and this waiting is not cruel. It is calm. You can almost feel the stillness of that moment, a soul beneath the soil, not forgotten, not judged, only waiting, watching the world move on, listening as time softens around it. Barzakh is also described in relation to the body. In Islamic tradition, the dead are washed, shrouded, and buried quickly, a gentle return to the earth. Prayers are recited. The community gathers, not just for farewell, but for mercy, because even in death, the body is honored. The soul may be elsewhere, but the grave is still sacred. Some traditions speak of the soul visiting loved ones in dreams, or hearing the footsteps of those who walk away from the burial. These stories do not offer certainty, but closeness. They remind the living that the veil is not harsh, only thin, and Barzakh itself is not static. It can shift. It can reflect. Some scholars say the soul in Barzakh continues to receive benefit from the living, from prayers, from charity, from any good done in their name. In this way, connection remains. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said, "When a man dies, his deeds come to an end, except for three things: ongoing charity, beneficial knowledge, or a righteous child who prays for him." Even in Barzakh, the ripple of goodness can reach the soul. It is not frozen. It is still touched by light. In Islamic cosmology, the soul is created long before birth, and it lives beyond death. Barzakh is only one chapter in its journey, a quiet one, held between the breath of life and the trumpet of resurrection. And that day, Yom al-Qiyamah, is certain. It is promised, but its hour is unknown. Until then, the souls in Barzakh wait. Some feel the warmth of prayers. Some lie in peaceful silence. Others reflect in shadows, held in the mercy of delay. But no soul in Barzakh is lost. None is beyond the reach of God. You begin to sense how soft this space is meant to be. Not a torment, but a turning. Not absence, but a pause. A reminder that the universe itself respects time. That judgment does not rush. That even the soul is given room to breathe. And perhaps that is part of divine wisdom. That between the noise of life and the final reckoning, there is space, stillness, a sacred interlude. Barzakh is not punishment. It is not reward. It is waiting with meaning. You imagine it now. The soul no longer bound by time, no longer distracted by the weight of flesh or the rush of thought, just resting, watching, remembering. And somewhere in that stillness, the memory of prayer continues to echo. The mercy of God, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, remains near, because in Islam, mercy always surrounds the soul, in life, in death, and even in waiting. And so Barzakh holds no terror for those who remember God. It is gentle, it is quiet, it is real, and like all things in the divine rhythm, it passes. The Norse halls, Valhalla, hell, and the cold beyond, in the cold breath of the north, where the wind moves like memory over stone. The Norse imagined many endings. Not one heaven, not one hell, but halls, many of them waiting in the beyond too. The people of Scandinavia, death was not a single gate, but a sorting, a return to the proper place. For those who died in battle, sword drawn, blood warm, there were two possible fates. Some were chosen by Odin. These souls soared to Valhalla, the hall of the slain. There, the dead warriors gathered beneath golden rafters. The roof, it is said, was made of shields. The gates, made of spears. Boar was roasted every night, and mead flowed endlessly. But this was not paradise in the soft sense. Valhalla was a place of glory and waiting. The warriors trained each day, dying and rising again, preparing for Ragnarok, the final battle to come. Even in death, they served a purpose. They belonged to war. Others, though just as brave, were not taken by Odin, but by Freya, the goddess of beauty, battle, and love. Her realm, Folkvanger, is gentler. A meadow, not a hall. Open fields where the fallen rest under her watch. Some believe it was kinder than Valhalla, less about combat, more about peace. But not all Norse souls died in battle. Many lived quiet. Lives, farmers, mothers, wanderers, healers. Those who passed in their sleep, or from age, or illness, did not vanish. Their afterlife, too, had a home. It was called hell. Not the Christian hell of torment and fire, but hell, beneath the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil. It was ruled by a goddess of the same name, Hel, daughter of Loki, half beautiful and half dead. She welcomed those who had died softly, or outside of glory. Hel's domain was not a place of punishment. It was slow, still, a realm of shadow, but not cruelty. The souls there were not tormented, only hushed, and flogging. Part of the Norse prose Edda, Hell is described as a place surrounded by high walls and vast gates. The air is cold, the light is dim. The river Gel flows nearby, crossed by the bridge Chauer Bra. guarded by a maiden with a face of stone. The dead do not scream in hell, they linger, they rest. Some lie beside ancestors, others walk the cold fields beneath an unmoving sky. It is a place of endings, not punishment, but permanence. For the Norse, this too was sacred. To imagine these halls, Valhalla, Folkvanger, hell is to glimpse how the Norse people shaped death in the image of their lives. They honored the strength of warriors. They remembered the peace of the meadow. They accepted the hush of snow. Even beyond these, there were more destinations. The sea dead, lost in shipwrecks or drowned in storms, were said to go to Ran, the sea goddess. She waded in the deep with her net, pulling souls beneath the waves. Hers was neither hall nor field, but water, cold and vast. Others spoke of Helgafell. There, the soul could wake each day to familiar routines. The light of home, the comfort of known hills. The Norse afterlife was layered. There was no single reward, no single punishment. There was return. Return to the gods, return to the land, return to stillness. And unlike many belief systems, the Norse did not teach eternal torment for sin. Instead, what mattered was honor, a life lived in alignment with one's role, courage, loyalty, truth to kin. The body might burn on a pyre, but the soul, Huger, carried on. You imagine now one of these halls, Valhalla's high ceiling, the clatter of drinking horns, laughter loud enough to shake the stars, or Folkvanger's wide meadow, morning mist curling over grass, silence broken only by the voice of birds, or hell, dark and cold, but not cruel, a place where the weary rest, where breath no longer strains, where time no longer hurries. In this way, the Norse vision of death was deeply human. It did not judge all by the same measure. It asked, instead, where each soul belonged, and belonging was the key. Even those who feared the path to hell did not fear hell itself. What was dreaded was not the realm, but the meaning of dying without honor. To die in shame was to leave no name behind, no song, no story. But the dead, wherever they went, were not forgotten. Rituals marked their passing. Graves were mounded, boats were burned, offerings were made to guide the soul, to comfort it, to remind the living that death was not the end, only a crossing, a sorting, a placement in the halls of the beyond. And so, in the Old North, death was not simple. It was many paths, many doors, some lined with flame, others with snow, each one shaped by the life that came before it. And you begin to feel, not fear, but a kind of steadiness, as if, in every end, there waits a hall, a room, a field, a fire, and someone standing at the gate, who already knows your name. The Tibetan Bardo, between breath and rebirth. In the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, death is not a wall. It is a doorway, soft, unsealed, leading not to a final destination, but into a space between, a passage known as the Bardo. The word Bardo means intermediate state. It refers to the gap between what was and what comes next, specifically, the time between death and rebirth. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo, Fiddle, this space lasts for 49 days. During this time, consciousness continues, not as a person, not with a body, but as awareness, free-floating, unmoored, experiencing visions shaped by the patterns of karma, memory, habit, and fear. This is not metaphor. To the Tibetan masters, the Bardo is as real as the waking world, but its reality is fluid, like a dream. When a person dies, they are said to pass first through the Chakai Bardo, the moment of actual death. Here, the clear light of the mind is revealed, pure, radiant, formless. It is the true nature of awareness, UNOBSCURED. If the consciousness recognizes this light, merges with it, liberation is possible. No rebirth, no wandering, just freedom. But most beings do not recognize the light. Fear rises, clinging returns. And so, the journey continues. Next comes the Tibetan Bardo, the Bardo of visions. Here, the consciousness encounters peaceful and wrathful deities, projections of the mind's own nature. Some are radiant, calm, with countless eyes and arms, gentle embodiments of wisdom. Others are terrifying with flames for mouths and skulls in their hands, but none are external. They are mirrors. These visions unfold over days. Each one offers a chance to see through illusion, to awaken, to let go of fear and desire. If the consciousness does not awaken, it moves into the Celtic Bardo, the Bardo of becoming. Here, the momentum toward rebirth begins. Visions grow more intense. The awareness feels pulled, not by choice, but by karma, the weight of actions, intentions, and attachments. Desire begins to shape form. The next life begins to take shape. In these teachings, rebirth is not punishment. It is simply the natural continuation of causes and conditions. You do not return to a body because you are forced. You return because something in you still reaches for touch, for breath, for the world. But throughout the entire Bardo journey, one truth remains. Liberation is always possible. Even at the edge of rebirth, if the awareness sees clearly, if it recognizes the dreamlike nature of its visions, it can let go, melt back into the clear light, return to the vastness that never began and never ends. The Bardo Fiddle was not originally written for the dead. It was written for the living to be read to the dead. Monks or loved ones recite the text aloud beside the body. Each day, for 49 days, they remind the departed soul of what is happening. They say, "Oh, nobly born. Now the time of the after-death state has come. Recognize the light. Let go of fear. Do not be drawn to the womb." The soul is addressed as nobly born, not as a sinner, not as lost, but as one with Buddha nature. Even in death, dignity is upheld. You imagine this now. A quiet room, a body, laid gently. Candles flicker, and beside the body, a voice reads, steady, sacred, slow, not for comfort, but for guidance, as if calling to someone in a deep sleep. Because in the Bardo, the soul is not dead in the final sense. It is still moving, still perceiving. The Buddhist masters compare the Bardo to a lucid dream, vivid, strange, unstable. Time feels different. Here, moments stretch, visions collapse and reform. Emotions rise like tides and vanish just as fast. There are flashes of color, memory, sound, 1,000 lifetimes in a single hour. A single emotion echoing for days. Some souls see heavenly realms. Others are drawn toward darker visions. But both are made of the same mind-stuff. And always the question is the same. Can you see clearly? Enough to know none of it is real. This is the secret of the Bardo. What appears is not judged by gods. It is reflected from within. Those who lived with great anger may meet angry deities. Those who clung to desire may see seductive illusions. But these are not punishments. They are patterns. The goal is not to escape them, but to recognize them. And so, Tibetan Buddhists prepare for death throughout life. They meditate on impermanence. They practice releasing attachment. They visualize the peaceful and wrathful deities. They rehearse the moment of death, not with dread, but with familiarity. Because to be familiar with the Bardo is to carry a map, to remember, even in the dream, that this too is just passing. And so the teachings say, when death comes, do not hold on. Do not flee the light. Do not grasp at form. Rest in the space between. Let the clear light carry you. You begin to sense this now, not as knowledge, but as atmosphere. The idea that death could be not an end, not even a transition, but a gentle dream between breath and breath again. And if, in that dream, you awaken, even for a moment, you may find that liberation was always waiting, not far away, but just behind the veil, not as a place, but as a clarity, the mind seeing itself. And then, no need to return, No need to grasp. No need to fear. Only the soft dissolving into space, into light, into silence. Comparing the realms. A reflection across time, across continents, across oceans, and empires, and eras, now buried in dust. Humans have asked the same quiet question. What happens when we die? The answers have never been identical. And yet, they have never truly opposed each other, either. In the heart of every tradition, whether ancient or enduring, there is an understanding. The soul does not end. It may rise. It may return. It may drift, sleep, awaken, or dissolve. But it does not vanish. This is the thread that runs through it all, through the chants of Egyptian priests as they sealed tombs with sacred oils, through the words of Zoroastrian firekeepers, watching the flames guide souls to judgment, through the whisperings of Buddhist monks, describing the gentle drift of consciousness through the Bardo, through the dreams of Norse seers, watching warriors cross the bridge to Valhalla, through the hush of Mesoamerican stargazers charting the path to the underworld of Xibalba. Different names, different rituals, but beneath them, a shared rhythm. The belief that something continues. In ancient Greece, the soul journeys to Hades, not as punishment, but as a return. Judges meet the newly dead and weigh their lives. Some souls move to the peaceful fields of Elysium, others to the shadowed plain of Asphodel, and for a few, reincarnation is granted a chance to walk the earth again, under new skies. The Greeks believed that memory was a choice. Drink from the river Lethe, and forget, or drink from Mnemosyne, and remember. In Hindu philosophy, the soul, the Atman, moves through lifetimes in a cycle called samsara, each life shaped by karma, each rebirth a reflection of previous choices. But always, there is the possibility of moksha, liberation from the cycle. Here, the goal is not heaven, but freedom, not reward, but release. To return not to another form, but to the infinite. Christian teachings, especially in their early expressions, offer yet another shape. The soul faces judgment. It ascends to paradise or descends into suffering. But even here, especially in mystic traditions, there are layers. Purgatory, the resurrection of the body. Visions of eternity as union, not merely reward. And in Islam, the soul enters the barzakh, a barrier between death and resurrection, a holding place, a space of waiting, and sometimes of reflection. Then comes the day of judgment. But until then, the soul rests, listens, dreams. Across indigenous cultures, the landscape of the afterlife often reflects the land itself. In some traditions of the Pacific Northwest, the dead journey westward across water. In certain African cosmologies, the ancestors are never far. They remain present, guiding, watching. To die does not mean to leave. It means to join something wider. Even among ancient Mesopotamians, where the afterlife was shadowy and grim, there was still continuity. The soul did not end. It lingered in the netherworld. Its peace depended on offerings made by the living. This sense of connection between the worlds, between the generations, is everywhere, and always. There is ritual, not for the body, but for the passage. Whether it is the opening of the mouth in Egyptian rites, or the sky burials of Tibetan Buddhists, or the Kadesh recited in Jewish mourning, the living have always held space for the dead to move on, and, in doing so, they remind themselves, we are not separate from those who came before. You begin to feel this now, not just as a collection of stories, but as something deeply human, the way one culture paints a stairway of fire, and another a cool river, the way one imagines a narrow bridge, and another a field of reeds. They are not contradictions. They are translations of the same knowing, that something in us is carried forward, that death is not the breaking of a thread, but the pulling of it into another weave. Even the modern world, which often forgets the sacred, cannot quite let go of this instinct. People still speak of energy, of presence, of feeling someone near. Science may chart the brain's final signals, but the heart continues to ask, where did they go? And perhaps more quietly, where will I go? Not in fear, but in curiosity, in longing. The vast array of beliefs across time shows that the specifics may differ. One path climbs a mountain, another enters a cavern. One believes in return, another in rest, another in release. But all hold the soul gently. All carry the idea that death is not the opposite of life. It is a part of it, a chapter, not the final one, just the next. You realize now that none of us are alone in this wandering. From the first funeral rites carved into bone to the soft words spoken at modern gravesides, every generation has faced the same dusk and whispered back to it with hope, with reverence, with stories. This is not just mythology. It is memory, carried through time, even if no one agrees on where the soul goes. Almost all agree that it goes somewhere, and that may be enough too. Know that you are part of a lineage of seekers, that you walk among those who've looked beyond the veil and tried to name what they saw, not to control it, but to honor it. The afterlife has many doors. Some are grand, carved with gods and thrones. Others are simple, a quiet garden, a return to earth, a dream without end. But the moment you see them side by side, you stop comparing, and you begin to hear the shared heartbeat underneath. A soft rhythm, circular, sacred, endless. As you drift, what do you believe now? There is no more need to search, no need to weigh or decide. You've heard the voices, not just of the gods, but of the people who followed them, who buried their dead with care, who knelt before altars, who dreamed of the sky, the earth, the fire, and the peace that might follow after. Their stories moved through time to reach you, not to persuade, but to sit beside you. Quietly, you've heard of fields where souls walk endlessly, and mountains where spirits rest until the stars shift. You've walked through the narrow halls of judgment, waited on the shores of distant rivers, stood in silence beneath cosmic trees. You've felt the weight of karmic law, the pull of resurrection, the hush of annihilation, and the soft promise of eternal light. And now there's just breath, yours, gentle, unhurried. What do you believe now? Not in a way that needs declaring, not with words or rules, just the quiet shape that forms in your chest when all the others fall away. Maybe you don't need to know. Maybe belief, here, is not about answers, but about being held in the same way as those who came before you. Held by time, held by story, held by the aching, enduring hope that this life is not the end. You've seen how every culture, every people, left behind something sacred, a gesture, a hymn, a ritual, a name, not because they had the truth, but because they had love. Love for those who passed, love for what might wait, love for the mystery that no one could touch, but all could feel. And you feel it now, like a thread around your chest, soft, secure, weightless. The question shifts. It is no longer what comes next, but what are you part of? A longer breath now. You feel your ribs expand. You feel the day exhale through you. And still, there is no need to decide. Maybe belief isn't a door. Maybe it's a window. One you don't have to climb through. Just look through, and let it light the room you're already in. The room of your mind, the room of your memories, the space inside you where sacred things rest without needing names. You imagine a soul, not as something separate, but as something current, like the warmth left in a blanket, or the rhythm in a lullaby, something that lingers, even when the voice is gone. That's what these stories were. Lullabies from the ancestors. Songs hummed across centuries. They never needed to be right, only tender. You feel now how belief can soften, not harden, not demand, just soften. You remember the river that carried the Egyptian soul, the wind that caught the Norse spirit, the fire that purified the Zoroastrian dead, the silence that awaited the Buddhist traveler. So many ways to cross. So many names for peace. So many versions of return. And somehow, they all echo each other. You realize every path they built for you, too. Not because they knew your name, but because they knew your fear, your wonder, your need to hold on to something as the light grows dim. This is the inheritance they left. Not doctrine, not law, but comfort. The kind of comfort that says, you are not strange for wondering. You are not alone in needing to be held. Even now, as your thoughts begin to slip, as your breath deepens, as the world narrows to quiet, you are still connected to all of them. Every mourner who lit a candle, every priest who whispered last rites, every elder who sang over a grave, every child who asked, where did they go? You are in their company now, and they are in yours. There's nothing more to ask, nothing more to learn tonight. Only the feeling of being part of something old, and wide, and beautiful. Let that be enough. Let the soul, whatever it is, be soft inside you, not defined, not proven, just present, like mist on still water, like a flicker before sleep. You've listened, you've imagined, you've remembered what it is to wonder. Now let go. Let the stories fall away. Let the silence return. Let your spirit rest, held not by answers, but by time, by all those who came before, and all those still to come, the ones who wondered too, the ones who believed something, anything, because it helped them sleep now. It helps you to sleep now, softly, soulfully. The Zoroastrian bridge of separation, and the old beliefs of Persia, death is not the end. It is a passage. The soul leaves the body, carrying with it the weight of every choice, every word, every silence. And when the final breath is gone, the journey begins toward the Chinvate Bridge. The bridge is not of stone or wood. It is said to be vast, yet as narrow as a razor's edge. To cross it is to face the measure of one's life. In Zoroastrian thought, this crossing is not random nor cruel. It is balance itself. The soul stands at the meeting point of truth and deceit, and only one path is possible. At the center of this belief lies the principle of Asha, truth, order, the harmony of existence. Asha is not only morality, but the natural law by which stars move, seasons turn, and justice unfolds. To live in accordance with Asha is to walk in alignment with the universe itself. To live against it is to step into falsehood, chaos, and distortion, called Druj. And so, when the soul arrives at the Chinvat Bridge, it does not face a random test. It faces the reflection of its own life. Those who honored truth, who gave kindness freely, who carried honesty in small and large things, they find the bridge broad and steady. It is said to open before them like a shining road. On the other side, they are greeted by luminous beings, welcomed into the realm of eternal light. But those who lived in cruelty or deceit, who clung to selfishness and falsehood, experienced the bridge differently. For them, the path narrows until it can no longer bear their weight. The soul slips, falling not into nothingness, but into darkness. The descent leads to the house of lies, a place of suffering born not from divine anger, but from the soul's own distance from truth. The imagery is sharp, yet it is not designed to terrify. It is a map of accountability. Zoroastrianism offers no way to deceive the bridge, no ritual to bypass it, no loophole in the cosmic law. What one carries into that crossing is only the truth of their life, nothing more, nothing less. You can imagine this scene, a bridge stretching across the twilight sky. Beneath it, an abyss that seems endless. Above it, stars bright with watchful stillness. The soul steps forward, and every action it ever took gathers weight. Every honest word steadies its footing. Every kindness makes the surface broader. Every betrayal narrows the way. Every cruelty tilts the balance. It is not a judge who speaks. It is truth itself. Ancient Zoroastrian texts describe guardians waiting at the bridge. One is Mithra, the Lord of Covenant and Truth. Another is Shrasha, the embodiment of obedience and conscience, whose role is to guide the soul through its judgment. And there is Rashnu, the angel of justice, holding scales that weigh the soul's deeds. Together, they ensure that balance is maintained and that no soul passes unfairly. For the righteous, another figure appears, a maiden, radiant and gentle. She is the Dand, the embodiment of the soul's own conscience. To those who lived with integrity, she appears as beautiful, clothed in light, her presence a comfort. But to those who lived in deceit, she appears twisted and frightening, the true mirror of their choices. The Dambi is not an external judge. She is the soul's own truth, revealed in visible form. Crossing the Chinvet Bridge, then, is more than a passage between worlds. It is a moment of recognition. The soul does not discover a hidden fate. It simply encounters what it has always carried. The bridge is separation, not between people, but between truth and falsehood, between harmony and distortion. And yet, Zoroastrianism also holds hope. Even in the house of lies, the punishment is not eternal without end. At the end of time, when the final savior comes and the world is renewed, all souls are purified through fire and molten metal. In that final cleansing, even those who once fell from the bridge are restored to truth. This belief places justice and mercy side by side, punishment for what is false, but eventual renewal for all. Imagine again the crossing. You are standing, at twilight, the bridge before you. To the left, shadows reach upward. To the right, starlight pours gently. You are not rushed. You take a step, and the bridge responds to your truth. If your life leaned toward kindness, the bridge widens. If it leaned toward harm, the edge grows thinner. Nothing is hidden. Nothing can be faked. This teaching carries a quiet weight, even now. It reminds one that every small action matters, that truth is not an idea, but a force that shapes reality itself. To live in Asha is to live in rhythm with creation, so that when the bridge comes into view, it feels not like judgment, but like returning home. The Chinvet Bridge remains one of the most enduring symbols of Zoroastrian afterlife thought. It binds cosmic order to personal responsibility, weaving the vastness of stars with the simplicity of human choices. It is at once terrifying and comforting, a reminder that what we carry in our lives is what will carry us across. And so, the soul walks step by step into silence, into stars, into the measure of truth that has always been waiting. The bridge holds steady. The abyss lies quiet, and the final breath still lingers, like twilight refusing to fade. The Aztec journey to Mictlan, in the beliefs of the Aztec world, death was not a sudden ending. It was a departure, a long passage that unfolded step by step. When a life closed its eyes for the final time, the soul began a voyage, unlike any travel in the living years. This path did not lead upward to the stars, nor downward into a single abyss. It wound across 9 distinct levels, each demanding strength, patience, and endurance. The final destination was Mictlan, the land of the dead. Unlike the heavens reserved for warriors or women who died in childbirth, Mictlan was the place most souls eventually reached. It was not a paradise of reward, nor a pit of punishment. It was stillness, a place of rest where the soul was released from the struggles of the earthly body. To arrive there was not failure, but completion. Aztecs believed the journey began with guides. Often, a spirit dog, the faithful Xoloitzcuintli, accompanied the soul. This hairless dog, kept in life and buried with its master, was said to know the ways of the underworld. Its role was to help the soul cross rivers and navigate barriers. Without it, the path could become nearly impossible. The dog was not just an animal, but a bridge between the living and the dead. The first level was a river known as a wide and unyielding. It demanded that the soul cross with the dog's aid. The dog carried no judgment. It helped only if its master had treated animals with kindness during life. To cross here was to learn that relationships mattered beyond death, that compassion for even the smallest creature could echo into eternity. The second stage was a place where mountains crashed together, endlessly opening and closing. The soul had to time its passage carefully, slipping between the peaks without being crushed. This was a trial of rhythm and patience, a reminder that timing shapes survival as much as strength. Beyond this lay the third level, swept by icy winds so sharp they cut through the spirit itself. The breath of these winds stripped the soul of earthly attachments, taking away remnants of warmth and comfort. It was not cruelty but cleansing, each gust leaving the traveler lighter, though more vulnerable. The fourth stage was a sky filled with obsidian knives. Sharp blades rained downward, piercing all who passed. Here, the soul endured pain without retaliation. To move forward meant accepting that suffering was part of the journey, not its end. At the fifth stage, the soul faced a place where mountains rose steep and endless. Climbing them was not easy. Each step required persistence. The soul pressed upward, not for reward, but because the path demanded it. This was endurance in its purest form. Then came the sixth trial, where icy deserts stretched without shelter. Snow and chill consumed the traveler, stripping away what strength remained. Many accounts describe this as a place where the soul's body finally gave way to fragility, a test of how long one could endure when every comfort was gone. The seventh stage brought a river of black water, swirling in deep. Without the Zeloid Squintly, the soul could not cross. Those with the dog at their side found the water parted with ease. Those without struggled, trapped on the banks. It was here that the bond between human and animal became most vital, proof that kindness lived on as a companion. The eighth stage was a region where the soul met winds, carrying spears and arrows, a storm of battle that could not be fought against. The traveler learned to walk forward through chaos, recognizing that resistance was futile. What mattered was simply continuing, letting the storm spend itself around them. At last, the ninth and final stage appeared, a broad plain of stillness. The soul entered Mictlan. There, the trials ended. No joy erupted, no music greeted them, yet no pain lingered either. Mictlan was not meant to dazzle, but to release. It was the deep silence of completion, the final exhale after struggle. For the Aztecs, this vision of the afterlife carried meaning in the living world. Death was not judged by wealth or triumph, nor measured by hidden sins. Instead, all were equal in the journey. Each soul walked the same path of 9 stages, and each faced the same trials. What made the difference was the help of spirit companions, the endurance learned in life, and the humility to move through hardship without turning away. This long passage reveals a philosophy that life's struggles are not wasted. Each challenge mirrors the soul's eventual road. Every mountain climbed, every storm endured, every act of kindness, all are rehearsals for the journey through death. To the Aztec mind, life and afterlife were woven together, each preparing the other. You may imagine this journey now. You are at the edge of the river, the dog at your side, its eyes bright with loyalty. The water is dark, yet it parts for you, because kindness carried you here. Beyond, mountains rise and fall, winds cut, and shadows test your steps. Yet none of it is hurried. Each trial is walked in rhythm, like footsteps slowly fading into dream, and then stillness arrives. The noise of knives, rivers, and winds vanishes. You stand in Mictlan, not in torment, not in glory, but in quiet release. It is the final home, where breath no longer struggles, where time no longer counts. 9 stages, 1 destination, a voyage both harsh and gentle, demanding, yet inevitable. In the end, it is not the obstacles that define the journey, but the way the soul walks through them. The plain of Mictlan waits, silent, steady, and eternal. Celtic otherworld, Tir, Na, Nog, In the old tales of Ireland, death was not the only doorway to eternity. There was also the crossing into another realm, not above the clouds or beneath the ground, but just beyond the edge of the visible world, across waters, through mists, or by the hand of a fairy guide. One might arrive at Tir na Nog, the land of youth. Tir na Nog was not heaven, nor was it a place of judgment. It was an island of endless spring, a land where trees stayed green, blossoms never faded, and no sorrow ever pressed upon the heart. In this other world, music never ceased, laughter rang without growing tired, and time flowed so gently that it seemed to stop. The Celts saw life and death not as strict opposites, but as woven realms. Tir na Nog was one of many other worlds, each with its own character, each reached by chance or destiny. Yet Tir na Nog held a special place in the imagination, for it promised freedom from the heaviest truths of mortal life, aging, illness, and grief. To enter was to step outside decay, into a forever youthful calm. Legends tell of heroes who reached this land. One of the most famous was Oisin, a poet and warrior of the Fianna. He was said to meet Niamh, a woman of radiant beauty, who rode across the sea on a white horse. She invited him to Tir na Nog, and together they crossed the waves. In that land, he found joy beyond measure. Yet when he returned to Ireland, after what felt like only a few short years, centuries had passed. As soon as he touched the ground of his homeland, age fell upon him, and he became an old man in an instant. This story held both wonder and warning. Tir na Nog offered eternal youth, but it was also a place apart from mortal time. To leave it was to feel the full weight of years. To stay was to surrender the world one once knew. In this way, the tale reminded listeners that every blessing carried a cost, and every escape a choice. Descriptions of Tir na Nog vary, but its core image is always gentle. There are rolling meadows, glimmering lakes, and banquets without end. Feasts never spoil, and joy never dulls. Unlike the harsh trials of some afterlife journeys, Tir na Nog is a vision of ease. It is not gained through punishment or reward, but through encounter, through invitation, accident, or fate. The Celts often spoke of thin places, where the boundary between this world and the other world grew soft. Tir na Nog was thought to lie across the western sea, past the horizon where the sun sinks each night. To sail toward the setting sun was to risk entering that hidden realm. Travelers did not always return, and when they did, they carried stories of strange beauty that seemed too real to dismiss. For those who longed for freedom from grief, Tir na Nog was hope. For those who feared forgetting the world of their kin, it was caution. It is this tension that makes the tale enduring, a paradise that comforts, yet unsettles, because it asks whether eternity without sorrow might also be eternity without growth. You may picture it now. The soft green fields, the hush of waves upon its shores, the air mild and sweet as spring. You walk with no weight upon your chest, no shadow on your mind. Time does not press forward. It drifts like a slow tide, unhurried and gentle. Each sound is music, each glance is youth unending. In Celtic thought, Tir na Nog was not simply fantasy. It was a mirror of yearning for rest, for beauty untouched by decay, for joy unbroken by loss. To imagine it was to give shape to the human wish that time might pause, that love and laughter might last without end. And yet, the stories always return to the sea, to the crossing, to the choice of staying or leaving. The land of youth is close, but never quite ours. It shimmers just beyond the horizon, a place both comfort and question. The isle waits, green and eternal. Whether it lies in waves, in memory, or in longing, it remains untouched by sorrow, unbroken by time. The Chinese courts of the afterlife. In the long memory of Chinese tradition, death was not the closing of the story. It was a passage through halls of justice, where the souls stood before the kings of the underworld. These rulers, 10 in number, Each presided over a court where deeds were recorded, weighed, and judged. The journey through these courts was not without trial. Punishments could be severe, mercies rare, yet every step carried meaning. The courts were not endless, nor were they eternal. They were stages in a process. The soul was held accountable, purified through consequence, and ultimately prepared for rebirth. This vision of the afterlife grew most vivid during the Temps and Song dynasties, when Buddhist, Taoist, and folk beliefs mingled together. At the heart of this system was Dayu, the underworld. It was not a single place, but a vast network of realms where the 10 kings ruled. Each king had scribes and messengers, each court had its own scrolls of judgment, and each soul was guided by attendants known as ox-headed and horse-faced guardians. The first court was ruled by King Qinguang here. The newly departed stood as records of their deeds were opened. Clerks read aloud the truth of a life, both kindness and cruelty, honesty and deceit. This was not a place of punishment, but of recognition. The soul listened as its story was revealed without disguise. If the deeds were light, the soul might be released quickly into rebirth. But for most, the path continued, and the journey deepened. The second court belonged to King Shujang. Here, punishments began. Souls who committed grave acts of violence or betrayal might face trials of burning, or freezing, of chains and torment. The imagery was harsh, not to inspire cruelty, but to impress the weight of moral consequence. In the third court, King Songdi ruled. This was the place where those guilty of theft or greed endured repayment, where the imbalances of life were corrected. Suffering here was not arbitrary. It was the turning of the scales, an echo of debts unpaid. The fourth court, ruled by King Wuguan, brought judgment for deceit. False witnesses, corrupt officials, or liars of any kind, stood here. Their tongues were burned, their words made visible, so that what had been hidden could no longer deceive. King Yan Luo, perhaps the most famous, presided over the fifth court. Here, both punishments and mercies were considered. Unlike other rulers, Yan Luo was often portrayed with compassion, listening carefully, weighing intention as much as action. He embodied the idea that justice is not only retribution, but discernment. Beyond his court, the journey continued. The 6th through 9th courts each carried their own focus, from betrayal of family, to abuse of trust, to the destruction of harmony. Each punishment mirrored the offense, not as vengeance, but as a teaching. The soul endured, not forever, but until the lessons of imbalance were impressed upon it. Finally, the 10th court awaited. Here ruled King Juan Lun, the keeper of rebirth. His role was not punishment, but passage. In this place stood the wheel of reincarnation. Souls prepared to return to life, cleansed of memory, yet shaped by all that had come before. Before rebirth, the soul met Lady Meng, the goddess of forgetfulness. She offered a cup of tea, known as Meng Po's soup. To drink it was to release memory of the afterlife and past lives, to step into the world again, unburdened by the weight of what had been. Without this drink, rebirth could not occur. And so, each soul returned, not empty, but quietly reshaped. This vision of 10 courts painted the afterlife not as final, but as a cycle. Punishments were real, but they were not without end. Mercy was possible, but it was earned through balance. At the core of the system lay the belief that no soul was ever abandoned. Every passage, however long, led back to the world of the living. You may picture it. 10 halls lit by lanterns, their glow flickering against stone walls. In each, a king waits, scrolls in hand, scribes bending over records that cannot be erased. The soul moves from one hall to the next, burdened, then lightened, tested, then released. Outside, the river of rebirth flows, waiting to carry each traveler forward. For the living, these stories served as guidance. They reminded people that actions had weight, that kindness mattered beyond the present, That cruelty left echoes no ritual could erase. Yet they also offered comfort. Even through trial, the soul was not lost. It was being prepared, cleansed, and readied for another chance. The courts of the afterlife became not just myth, but moral teaching, a way of keeping order among the living through images of accountability beyond death. Families honored ancestors with offerings, hoping to ease their journey. Priests and monks recited rites to guide them, sending prayers into the halls of judgment. Through it all, the 10 kings remained symbols of balance. Their lanterns still flicker in memory, guiding not only the dead, but also the living, who wonder about the weight of their own steps. The soul moves onward, always onward, through records and reckonings, through silence and fire, through forgetfulness and return, and somewhere, a cup waits warm, gentle, and ready to be lifted to the lips. The Dreamtime of Indigenous Australia, the Dreamtime for the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, is not a single moment in the distant past. It is the foundation of the world, the source of all life, and the rhythm that continues to unfold with every breath of wind, every step upon the earth. It tells not just how the land was created, but how it continues to be held together by song, spirit, and memory. In this tradition, death is not an end. It is a return, a flowing back into the eternal dreaming, where the soul travels along song lines that bind the living to the ancestors. The dreaming is alive, always present, stretching across time without boundaries. It is not yesterday or tomorrow, but a great circle that holds all stories together. The land itself carries these stories. Mountains rise as reminders of ancestral beings who shaped them. Rivers wind their way through deserts and plains, echoing the paths once walked by creator spirits. Every tree, every stone, every star above is a marker of an event in the dreaming. To walk upon the land is to walk upon a sacred text, written not in ink, but in the very contours of earth and sky. Aboriginal songlines hold these maps of creation. They are not only songs, but pathways, guiding both the body and the soul. To sing a songline is to retrace the steps of the ancestors, to keep their presence alive. These songs connect one region to another, weaving the vastness of Australia into a single sacred network. For the people, to forget the songs would be to forget who they are. In the dreamtime, spirits do not vanish. They remain with the winds that cross the red deserts, with the rains that break the dry season, with the stars that guide the night traveler. When a person dies, their soul journeys back along the songlines, returning to the spirits who shaped the world. The earth welcomes them home, as it has done for countless generations. You imagine a desert night, still and endless. The constellations above are not distant lights, but ancestral beings watching from their places in the sky. They remind you that time does not flow only forward. It circles back, carrying each life into the dreaming, where nothing is truly lost. Dreamtime stories often speak of animals who carried wisdom, of serpents who carved valleys, of birds who brought fire or water to the people. These beings are not only myths, but ancestors themselves. Their actions shaped both the visible and invisible worlds, and their essence continues in the creatures still walking the land. A kangaroo bounding across the plains, a lizard resting on hot stone, a snake gliding through the grass. Each is a living reminder of the dreaming. Even in silence, the land speaks. The colors of the soil shift with the sun, red to orange too, deep purple as night falls. Each hue is part of the memory, a reminder that the dreamtime is not separate from daily life. To the people, the world is alive, conscious, and filled with spirit. No boundary exists between the sacred and the ordinary. For those who walk in these traditions, caring for the land is more than survival. It is a responsibility, a sacred trust. To harm the earth would be to wound the ancestors themselves. To walk gently upon it is to honor the spirits who remain ever present, guiding, watching, remembering, and so, the dreamtime continues. It is not sealed away in the past, but woven into every sunrise, every story told around a fire, every footprint left upon the sand. The cycle of life and death does not break. It bends back into the earth, into the song lines, into the timeless breathing of the land itself. You begin to feel how this vision carries both comfort and weight. The soul is never forgotten, never alone, always bound to the ancient dreaming. Even as bodies return to dust, the songs endure. And in those songs, each spirit finds its way home, like the whisper of wind through gum trees. The dreamtime waits, silent, eternal, unbroken. Polynesian voyages to the spirit world. Across the scattered islands of the Pacific, the sea is more than water. It is memory, origin, and the eternal pathway. To live upon an island is to live with horizons, and in the minds of Polynesian peoples, the horizon is not an end. It is a threshold, a doorway through which the soul continues its voyage. When death comes, it is not seen as silence. Instead, the spirit begins a new journey. Many traditions speak of Hawaii, the ancestral homeland, both the place from which the first people came, and the place to which all spirits return. Hawaii is not marked on any map. It lies beyond the visible sea, across the horizon, where the sun sinks, where memory and time fold back into one another. To say a person returns there after death is to say they go home, back to the origin of all families and lineages. In some island groups, the journey of the spirit is described as a true voyage, as if the soul steps onto a canoe and sets sail. Just as the ancestors once crossed thousands of miles of ocean guided only by stars, so too must the spirit find its way through the night sky and the restless waters of the unseen world. To navigate such a voyage is not to be lost, but to be guided. The constellations that once marked safe passage for living sailors become beacons for the dead, lighting the way to the land of spirits. Elsewhere, the path is told differently. Some Polynesians believe the spirit does not leave by canoe, but by climbing. Sacred trees stand as ladders between worlds, their roots in the earth, their branches touching the sky. From these high places, the spirit leaps, not downward, but upward, into the unseen sky realms. The leap is not feared, it is release, a return to lightness, as though the soul becomes as weightless as a bird on the wind. Always the sea itself is present. To Polynesian thought, the ocean is never empty. It is the skin of the world, breathing with the tides, and within it move ancestral presences. The waves carry voices, the winds carry memory. When a canoe departs from the shore, whether in life or in death, it is never alone. The ocean listens, the ocean receives, and in time, the ocean delivers the soul to its destination. You may imagine, for a moment, the silence of night on a Pacific island. The stars stretch wide and sharp, a canopy of endless light. Beneath them, the ocean shimmers, carrying its slow rhythm. For those who lived there, such nights were not simply beautiful, they were maps, reminders, promises. The same stars that guided the living across the seas were believed to also guide the spirits to Hawaii. To look at them was to feel connected, not only to ancestors, but to one's own future journey. Some stories describe the passage of the soul as accompanied by gods or guardians. The spirit does not wander alone. It may be welcomed by figures from mythology, deities of the sea, the winds, or the underworld. These presences do not punish, nor do they reward. They guide, they open the way, ensuring that the soul reaches its true home. There are also tales of places along the islands that serve as spiritual gateways. Cliffs where the land drops steeply into the sea, or groves where sacred trees grow, are seen as departure points. At these edges of the world, the soul steps off, leaves the realm of the living, and begins the crossing. Islanders knew these places, they stood upon them, whispered prayers there, and honored them as sacred thresholds. To stand on such a cliff at sunset, was to feel close to the ancestors, as though their presence lingered in the winds rising from the waves below. In some traditions, the voyage of the soul is not permanent at first. The spirit may remain near the living for a time, visiting, protecting, or lingering in familiar places. Death does not bring distance immediately. It is gradual, like a tide that recedes slowly, allowing the living to still feel the nearness of their loved ones before the spirit fully departs. Only after this passage of days, or sometimes moons, does the soul continue on its way across the sea to Hawaii. This belief binds together the living and the dead, land and ocean, body and sky. In Polynesian thought, nothing is separated for long. The canoe that carried the ancestors across the Pacific is also the vessel of the soul. The waves that nourished the islands are also the path of return. The tree that shades the village is also a stairway to eternity. To live with these beliefs is to live in rhythm with nature itself, never apart from it. You may begin to sense the tenderness in these traditions. Death is not final departure. It is a voyage, a reunion, a movement along a path that has always been waiting. And in imagining that path, the heart feels less fear, more calm, as though one is already part of a voyage greater than the single span of years. The sea continues its rhythm, slow and eternal. The horizon remains, waiting. And when the time comes, the soul steps onto its vessel, whether a canoe, a star, or a tree branch, and drifts gently toward that hidden shore, that unseen homeland where the ancestors dwell, like waves folding back into the tide. The spirit does not vanish. It returns. African visions, the ancestors' embrace across the wide lands of Africa. From deserts to forests, from high plateaus to flowing rivers, death was rarely seen as an ending. Instead, it was a passage into continuity. A man or woman who left the world of the living was not thought to vanish into absence. They crossed into another circle, one that remained intertwined with the daily life of their family and community. In many traditions, the ancestors were close. They were not distant gods, unreachable or abstract. They were parents, grandparents, and kin who had walked the same paths, worked the same fields, sung the same songs. Their spirits lingered in the air, in the earth, in the steady rhythm of daily life. Death did not erase them. It gave them another kind of present, guiding, enduring. Rituals shaped this bond. In West Africa, families poured libations of water, palm wine, or millet beer onto the ground before meals and gatherings. Each drop was an offering to those who had passed, a gesture of respect and remembrance. To pour was to acknowledge, you are still with us, you have not been forgotten. The earth absorbed the liquid, carrying the message to the unseen ones. Names carried power too. To speak the name of an ancestor was to keep their spirit alive. A child might be given the name of a grandparent, not only to honor but to continue the lineage of soul and memory. Silence, on the other hand, was dangerous. To forget a name was to risk severing the tie, to let the spirit drift into loneliness. Memory was a sacred duty, and forgetting was a wound. The ancestors were not passive. They listened, and they answered. In dreams, they appeared to offer warnings or encouragement. A hunter might see the face of his father the night before a journey, reminding him of patience and vigilance. A mother might feel her grandmother's voice urging her to protect the hearth and keep the family together. These were not imagined phantoms, but real presences. The living trusted these visions as guidance, just as they trusted the words of the elders still walking among them. Communities often built shrines at the edge of villages, small structures of wood, stone, or clay where offerings could be placed. These were not temples of grandeur, but humble thresholds. A carved figure, a dish of food, a vessel of drink, simple tokens, yet filled with meaning. To place them there was to affirm that the ancestors were not gone. They watched. They blessed. They held the fragile link between past and present. Across regions, variations blossomed. Among the Akan of Ghana, the concept of sunsum described the spirit that connected body to soul, and in death, this essence joined the ancestors, who remained active in the fate of the living. Among the Shona of Zimbabwe, the Vadzamu spirits were guardians, protecting families, granting fertility, guiding harvests. Among the Yoruba, the ancestors joined Orin, the realm of spirit, where they could intercede with the divine and influence life below. Always, the theme remained: the dead are not gone, they are transformed. This presence also brought responsibility. The living owed the ancestors respect, and neglect could invite unrest. A forgotten offering, a broken vow, an abandoned tradition, these could disturb the balance. Misfortune might follow, crops withering, illness spreading, disputes multiplying. To restore harmony, rituals of appeasement were performed, a reconciliation between the seen and the unseen. The relationship was delicate, like the tending of a fire, constant, careful, essential. Yet there was comfort in this nearness. In times of grief, families believed their loved ones were not lost, but watching. A burial was not a goodbye, but a transition. Graves were visited, songs were sung, and stories were told by the firelight to weave the dead into the living memory of the community. Children listened, absorbing the tales not only as history, but as presence. The story of a warrior's bravery or a grandmother's wisdom became a living thread that carried the ancestor forward in each generation. You imagine sitting at such a fire, the night sky wide above, voices weaving names and deeds into the smoke. The air is thick with warmth and belonging. You feel the circle tighten, as if those who left long ago leaned closer, drawn by remembrance. In this circle, no soul is lost. Memory holds them, and through memory, they breathe again. The African vision of death is not heavy with finality. It is layered, woven, cyclical. Life continues, not in the same form, but in another rhythm and echo that still sings in the present. To live is to join a chain, and to die is to shift one's place within it. A human life is never solitary. It is bound to those before and those yet to come. Some traditions even describe the unborn as waiting in the company of ancestors before they enter the world. Thus, the spirit world is both beginning and continuation, both welcome and farewell. The ancestors are guardians of this threshold, keeping the balance between what was, what is, and what will be. The whispers of these beliefs remain alive today. At weddings, funerals, and festivals across villages and cities, the ancestors are invoked, honored, remembered. Even in modern life, where concrete replaces earth and silence replaces ritual, the sense of their presence endures. A sudden dream, a familiar scent, a memory rising unbidden, these are felt as signs, gentle touches from the other side. And so across Africa, death is never emptiness, it is an embrace. It is the gathering of kin beyond sight, the widening of community to include the unseen. In this vision, no one truly departs. The living walk with the dead, and the dead watch with the living. The night feels softer within such a truth. To imagine ancestors near is to imagine love stretched across time, unbroken, unyielding. You may feel yourself resting in that circle, now, where memory is not a burden but a home, and every soul is folded gently into belonging. Native American spirit worlds, across the vast lands of the Americas, from northern plains to desert canyons, from dense forests to coastal waters. Visions of the afterlife flowed with as much diversity as the landscapes themselves. Each tribe carried its own understanding, shaped by the rhythms of the earth around them. To speak of the spirit world was never to speak in abstraction. It was to speak of the land, the sky, the animals, and the seasons woven together in a sacred fabric where death was not the end, but a passage. For many of the Plains tribes, the afterlife was described as the happy hunting grounds. Here, the world was endless prairie, abundant with buffalo, elk, and deer. The soul, once freed from the body, walked into a place of harmony. There was no hunger, no war, no sickness. Every hunt was successful, and every being lived without fear. This vision reflected not only the importance of the hunt in daily survival, but also the hope for a life beyond scarcity, a dream of balance and continuity. Some tribes, such as the Lakota and Cheyenne, believed the soul faced trials before reaching this place. Death did not carry one instantly to paradise. There were paths to be walked, obstacles to be crossed, and judgments to be weighed. The soul might encounter spirits, testing its courage, or guardians ensuring it was ready to enter a realm of plenty. These stories taught the living that honor, respect, and virtue in this world shaped the journey into the next. Farther north, among tribes like the Ojibwe, the Milky Way itself was seen as the path of souls. The shimmering band of stars across the night sky was not distant, it was a road. When the spirit left the body, it walked along this celestial trail, guided by the light of ancestors. The dead were not gone. They became part of the brilliance above, watching, guiding, and reminding the living of their place in the greater circle of existence. You imagine this now, the stars stretched wide above a quiet night, each spark a presence, each glimmer a memory that does not fade. To look upward was to look into kinship, to know the sky is filled not with emptiness but with company. Among the Navajo, the afterlife carried a more cautious tone. Death was a powerful transition, and the spirit, once released, could bring danger, if not properly guided away. The Navajo spoke of Chindai, the residual spirit left after death, often linked to unresolved emotions or illness. Rituals and careful practices ensured that the dead moved on fully, without clinging to the living. To leave death untended was to invite imbalance. Here, the spirit world was not only a place of reunion, but also of respect for boundaries, the living and the dead dwelling in harmony. Only when the passage was honored. Other peoples, like the Hopi, envisioned layered worlds, each one existing above the other. Earth itself was one of these worlds, and the afterlife was a journey upward into another plane. The dead joined spirits who had gone before them, contributing to the cycles of rain, fertility, and the sustaining of life. The dead were not separate from the living. They worked on behalf of the community, just as they had in life. To the Pueblo peoples, ancestors were not distant shades, but active presences. They appeared in the form of clouds, storms, and seasonal winds. When rains blessed the dry land, it was understood as the gift of those who had passed on. Thus, the afterlife was not only about where the soul went, it was about how the dead continued to nourish the living, ensuring the survival of the people. On the northwest coast, in cultures like the Tlingit and Haida, death was closely tied. 2 cycles of rebirth. A soul could return, entering a newborn child within the family. The living recognized this through dreams, visions, or signs at the time of birth. Death, then, was not an ending, but part of a circle, the spirit weaving through generations, ensuring continuity across time. You begin to see the pattern: life and death, not standing apart, but interwoven, flowing like rivers that bend, separate, and join again. For each tribe, the afterlife reflected their relationship to nature, to animals, to sky and earth. There was no single doctrine, no rigid rule. Instead, there was listening, to the land, to the ancestors, to the quiet between breaths. Even within tribes, the vision of the afterlife shifted with time and with story. Some spoke of great lodges waiting beyond death, where families gathered around eternal fires. Others described dangerous rivers the soul must cross, with the help of spirit animals. In every telling, one truth remained: life was not alone, and death was not the end of belonging. The presence of ancestors, whether in stars, in clouds, in animals, or in newborn children, reminded the living that they walked always within a circle. To live well was to honor that circle, knowing that one day they too would become part of it. And so, when night came and the stars stretched out across the sky, many tribes lifted their eyes not in fear, but in quiet recognition. The spirit world was vast, but it was also near. Each light, each shadow, each breath of wind carried the memory of those who had gone before. Lift your gaze inward, as if to the stars themselves. Imagine the long road of light souls, moving quietly along its path, each one returning, each one waiting, each one shining. The journey never ends. It only changes direction, like a river bending toward the sea. Mesopotamian descent to Urkala, the people of ancient Mesopotamia, Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, carried within their minds a vision of death, unlike the radiant heavens or endless punishments found in other lands. For them, the afterlife was not a place of fiery torment, nor a paradise of eternal joy. Instead, it was Urkala, the land of no return. To die was to step into this realm, not as a hero or a sinner, but simply as one who had reached the end of breath. Kings and servants, warriors and herdsmen, all descended together. No prayer, no offering, no good deed could change the direction of the path. Death was not a judgment, but a passage. Urkala was imagined as a vast, shadowed place beneath the earth. It had gates, guarded by watchful beings, and walls that enclosed its silent expanse. At its heart reigned the goddess Ereshkigal, sister of Inanna, bound to the throne of this hidden kingdom, where her sister was the goddess of love and fertility. Ereshkigal ruled over silence and stillness. She was neither cruel nor kind. She was simply sovereign of the inevitable. The shades who entered her realm were described as drinking only dust, eating only clay. They were not tortured, but they were diminished, drifting in a pale existence, stripped of their former strength. It was a life without hunger, yet without satisfaction, without sunlight, yet without night. A muted eternity, as though every sound, every color, every breath had been thinned into a shadow. And yet, even here, there was order. Urkala was not chaos. The Mesopotamians understood death as part of a divine system, woven into the rhythm of the cosmos. The underworld had its hierarchy. The queen Ereshkigal, her consort Nergal, in some stories, her messengers and gatekeepers, and the shades who obeyed her silent rule. Death had no end, but it had structure. Stories of descent echo through Mesopotamian myth. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero loses his companion, Enkidu, who is carried into the underworld. Enkidu describes a realm where kings now serve as servants, where warriors line the halls, where the living and the dead no longer stand apart. Gilgamesh himself, when seeking immortality, learns that no one escapes this fate. His quest ends, not with victory over death, but with the acceptance of human limits. Perhaps the most haunting of these tales is the journey of Inanna, who dared to enter her sister's domain. To pass into Urkala, she had to surrender piece by piece her royal garments, her jewels, her crown, until she stood naked and powerless before Ereshkigal. Stripped of all titles, she was judged, struck down, and left to hang lifeless. It was only through the intervention of clever allies that she returned. But the story lingers. Even gods cannot tread Urkala freely, for its gates hold fast to those who lived along the rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates. This vision of the afterlife brought both dread and peace. It stripped away illusions of eternal reward, but it also removed the terror of endless torment. Death was simply the next place, as certain and impartial as the setting sun. Imagine, for a moment, standing in their world. The rivers flood and recede, the fields yield grain and then lie barren, the seasons turn. Life itself is fragile, held together by the will of gods whose tempers are unpredictable. In such a world, Urkala becomes not an enemy, but a certainty. It is the place where the storm ends, where the weary find stillness. Not joy, not pain, only the quiet ground of silence. you begin to sense why their stories gave such weight to memory. To be remembered by the living was to resist, in some small way, the fading of our kala. Offerings of bread and water were placed for the dead, not to grant them freedom, but to soothe their shades, to give them a taste of care across the barrier of death. In return, the dead could bless or trouble the living, their presence lingering at the edge of night. Irkalla was the land of no return, yet the boundary between the living and the dead was never entirely sealed. Ghosts walked in Mesopotamian belief, not as monsters, but as restless remnants who called for attention. When neglected, they could bring illness or misfortune. When honored, they could bring protection. Thus the living carried responsibility, binding family ties across the shadowed divide. This vision speaks of a people who did not separate life from death, but saw both as one continuous flow. The body returned to clay, the soul descended below, the living remembered, and the cycle continued. To them, immortality was not the promise of heaven, but the endurance of name and memory, the whisper of a story carried forward. And so, drifting down into Arkala is not a plunge into terror, but into inevitability. The descent is slow, steady, unchanging. The dust welcomes, the silence deepens. The queen sits upon her throne. One may resist, one may grieve, but in time all footsteps lead there. Even now, as you picture the dim halls of this ancient underworld, you feel the weight of its calm, not punishment, not reward, simply the still balance of shadow. It is a vision that carries no comfort, and yet, in its honesty, there is a strange peace. For what is more certain than the path that no one avoids? What is more equal than the land where all arrive the same? The Mesopotamians called it Arkalla, the land of no return. You may call it by another name, but in the quiet of night, the thought lingers like a stone at the bottom of a river. One day, all roads lead here. The mystery of Eleusis, Greek, initiates hope. In the land of Greece, not far from the bustle of Athens, a sacred site stood apart. Eleusis, a small town nestled in quiet fields, carried a weight far greater than its size. Here, for nearly 2,000 years, initiates came to walk a path of silence, secrecy, and transformation. The mysteries of Eleusis were not simply rituals. They were promises. Promises that death was not the end, and that even in darkness, renewal awaited. At the heart of these mysteries stood the goddesses Demeter, the mother of the grain, and Persephone, her daughter, bound to both earth and underworld. Their story framed the rites. Their myth gave language to the hidden truths. Demeter, goddess of harvest, had once mourned Persephone's abduction into the shadow realm of Hades. In her grief, crops withered, and the earth grew barren. Only when Persephone returned, for part of each year, did the world awaken again. Thus, the cycle of growth and decline, of birth and descent, became a mirror for the soul itself. The mysteries were divided into two stages, the lesser and the greater. The lesser mysteries took place first, in Athens, during spring. They were preparatory, a cleansing of body and mind, where initiates bathed, made offerings, and prepared their spirit for deeper truths. The greater mysteries came in autumn, in Eleusis itself. For 9 days, sacred rituals unfolded, days that bound the living to the gods, and the mortal to the eternal. The journey began with a procession from Athens to Eleusis, along the sacred way. Pilgrims walked together, chanting and carrying torches, symbols of the light carried into darkness. Imagine the air filled with anticipation, thousands moving as one body, their footsteps steady along the ancient road. The dust of the path clung to their robes, but their eyes were lifted toward a promise, something waiting in the halls of Eleusis that could not be spoken aloud. The secrecy of the mysteries was absolute. To reveal the rites was to risk death, for the sacred trust was considered divine. What exactly happened inside the Telesterion, the great hall of initiation? Shrouded in silence, Yet through fragments of testimony, whispers from poets, and the echoes of philosophy, the contours can be traced. Inside, initiates faced a sequence of sacred acts, fasting, drinking the kykeon, a barley-based drink tied to Demeter's myth, and beholding things shown and said that imprinted themselves onto the soul. The moment of revelation, the Epipeda, was said to grant a vision, one that did not simply entertain the eyes, but awakened the heart. Some spoke of fire bursting forth, of symbols revealed, of Persephone herself emerging from the shadows. Yet others insisted the mystery was not in spectacle, but in the deep knowing it stirred. The Greek writer Pindar once said of the mysteries, "Blessed is he who has seen these rites before he goes beneath the earth, for he understands the end of life and the God-given beginning." That was the hope Eleusis offered, not immortality of the body, but a recognition that death was a passage, not an erasure. Even great minds sought initiation. Plato, in his writings, hinted that philosophy itself mirrored the journey of Eleusis, a turning from shadows toward truth. Cicero, the Roman statesman, called the mysteries the greatest gift Athens had given to the world, because through them, people learned not only to live with joy, but also to die with hope. The beauty of Eleusis lay not in escape from mortality, but in its embrace. The myth of Persephone reminded initiates that descent was natural, that darkness was part of the cycle. But just as winter yields to spring, so too does death yield to a hidden renewal. This did not erase grief, but it transformed it, giving shape to loss and rhythm to return. Imagine, for a moment, standing in the Telesterion. The hall is vast, its stone walls enclosing the whispers of thousands across centuries. Torches flicker, casting soft light on solemn faces. The air carries a weight of barley, herbs, and incense. And then, in that sacred space, silence. A silence so deep, it seems to hold the breath of the earth itself. You do not know what will come, but you feel the stirring of something greater, as though the soil beneath your feet is not solid ground but a hidden womb, preparing to release life once more. To the Greeks, these rites were not only for individuals, but for the polis, the community itself. For as each person emerged from initiation changed, so too did the city gather strength. Hope became not a private treasure, but a shared foundation, woven into festivals, songs, and offerings that tied the people to their gods. Over time, even as empires rose and fell, Eleusis endured. When Romans ruled Greece, they too were drawn to its promise. When wars swept through, still the rites continued. Yet in the 4th century of the Common Era, with the rise of Christianity and the edicts against pagan worship, the mysteries were silenced. The Telesterion fell to ruin. The secrets of Eleusis, once guarded so fiercely, slipped into history's shadow, and yet their echo lingers. In the myth of Persephone, seasons still turn. In the memory of Eleusis, the yearning for renewal remains. The rituals are gone, but the human need, they answered, endures, the need to believe that endings are not final, that beneath the stillness of death, seeds wait quietly for their time to rise. Perhaps that is why even now, when one hears of the Eleusinian mysteries, there is a pull, not of curiosity alone, but of something older. The sense that humanity has always sought this assurance that, like Persephone, we too may descend and return. That hope does not deny the darkness, but breathes through it, steady and patient, like the green shoots that pierce the soil after winter's long rest. And as the memory of Eleusis drifts across centuries, you feel its quiet rhythm, life and death, descent and return. The cycle turns, unbroken. The promise lingers, soft as a whisper, steady as the earth itself. The Hebrew Sheol, a silent resting place in the ancient world of the Hebrews. Death carried no clear promise of heaven or hell. Instead, it led to Sheol, a shadowed resting place beneath the earth. Sheol was not fiery punishment, nor was it radiant paradise. It was silence, a realm where kings and shepherds, prophets and laborers, all shared the same fate. For the earliest Hebrew communities, Sheol was understood as inevitable. It was the destination of every life, without distinction of power or wealth. The Psalms speak of it with quiet resignation. The dead do not praise the Lord, nor do any who go down into silence. Sheol was not feared as torture, nor longed for as reward. It was the ground itself, still and unbroken. A universal end. Picture the ancient Israelites, standing on their land, hands pressed into the soil. They believed this earth, the same earth that grew their grain and held their ancestors, also received their spirits. To be buried was to return not only to dust, but to the collective dwelling of all who had gone before. In these early writings, Sheol had no flames, no tormentors, no gates of pearl. It was described instead as a cavern, a shadowed chamber, sometimes called the pit. In Job, the language is stark. Before I go whence, I shall not return, even to the land of darkness and the shadow of death. The book of Job places Sheol as a place where light itself fades, where all things are equalized, for those who suffered in life. There was a strange comfort in that, leveling that tyrants and victims both lay in the same stillness. Sheol was also seen as a place where memory blurred. The living called upon God, but those in Sheol no longer had voice. To die was to step into quiet anonymity, as though time itself no longer reached. This image can feel heavy, but to the Hebrews, there was also a form of peace in it. Rest was itself holy. Stillness was itself a gift. Yet even in this silent vision, hope flickered. The Hebrew scriptures begin to show shifts across centuries. Some verses hint at deliverance, of God's power reaching even into Sheol. Psalm 139 whispers, "If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there." The idea that God's presence could stretch into the shadows offered reassurance that, even in silence, one was not abandoned. The prophets, too, began to imagine more. Isaiah speaks of the earth giving birth to the dead, of bodies rising from the dust to sing again. Daniel gives perhaps the clearest voice to resurrection, declaring, "Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." With time, Sheol shifted from being only a quiet chamber of equality to a threshold, a place from which renewal might come. But before resurrection, there was rest. To lie down in Sheol was to be gathered. The patriarch Jacob, when grieving his lost son Joseph, cries that he will go down to Sheol, to his son, mourning. To the Hebrews, Sheol was also reunion. It was the dwelling of ancestors, a place where the family of Israel was held together beyond breath. The silence of Sheol did not mean absence of meaning. It reflected the Hebrew understanding of life as fragile gift. The urgency lay in this present moment to love God, to walk in justice, to live righteously. Sheol was not a threat but a reminder. All paths meet in silence. What mattered was how one walked the path before arriving there. In later Jewish writings, Sheol became more layered. Some spoke of divisions within it, places for the righteous, places for the wicked. Others described it as temporary, a waiting chamber until the day of resurrection. The silence began to hold expectation, as though the still earth beneath was not only an ending, but a womb. From stillness, something new might be born. Imagine, for a moment, the desert night of ancient Israel. The stars stretch vast above, uncountable, eternal. Beneath the ground, Sheol rests in its silence. The people who walked before you lie in its shadow. Yet above, the heavens remain, and with them, the steady belief that God's covenant endures. This balanced silence below, promise above, formed the rhythm of Hebrew faith. For those who carried burdens, Sheol's quietness was not only emptiness, it was release. The prophet Samuel, when summoned by the living after his death, speaks with weariness. "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" To rest in Sheol was to be free from striving, free from struggle, folded back into the stillness of the earth. The later hope of resurrection did not erase Sheol, but gave it new shape. The silence was not final, but preparatory. Just as a seed must fall into soil, unseen and still, before it rises, so too did souls rest in Sheol before awakening. This image brought comfort, a rhythm that tied the cycle of life to the ground itself. For early Christians, who inherited the Hebrew scriptures, Sheol became linked with their own vision of afterlife. Translated into Greek, it was often equated with Hades, yet its essence remained the dwelling of the dead, waiting in shadow. But the Hebrew sense of equality, of rest, of reunion, lingered. The silence of Sheol was remembered as the place from which resurrection would first bloom. Now, across centuries, the word itself still carries its weight. Sheol is not heaven, not hell, but something quieter. It is the soil, the cavern, the silent chamber beneath time. To the Hebrews, it was not punishment, not reward. It was simply the truth of mortality shared by all, held by God, softened by the hope of what might come after. And perhaps that is its lasting gift. To think of Sheol is to face death not with fire or terror, but with stillness. It asks you to imagine rest as sacred, silence as holy, and the earth itself as the keeper of souls. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can feel it. The quiet beneath the soil, the stillness that gathers every life. Not erasure, not tormented, silence unbroken, holding you gently until the world is made new. Yet silence was not emptiness. The ancients understood Sheol as a place where striving ceased, where voices no longer rose in praise or lament. It was not cruel, but it was without song. To be in Sheol was to be beyond memory's reach, where names no longer carried weight, and where even kings found their crowns dissolved into dust. Scripture spoke of it with simplicity. The Psalms often whispered of the grave, of a descent into Sheol, where the living could no longer give thanks, where the heart beat no more in worship. To fear Sheol was not to fear punishment, but to fear being forgotten, to be placed beyond the warmth of the living world. Still, this vision carried its own form of equality. For the Hebrew people, Sheol reminded them that no soul, however mighty or humble, could resist the earth's embrace. The shepherd and the sovereign shared the same bed of shadows. In this way, Sheol quietly stripped away the illusions of power, leaving only the truth of mortality. Over time, as centuries passed, hope began to stir against this silence. Prophets and poets began to dream of something more, a resurrection, a breath that could pierce even the stillness of Sheol. The book of Daniel speaks of those who sleep in the dust of the earth awakening, some to everlasting life. From the quiet earth, a promise unfolded. This shift did not erase the vision of Sheol, but wove new meaning into it. Silence became not the end, but the waiting ground. The grave became less a prison and more a threshold. One could imagine lying down in shadow, yet one day rising again, as the earth itself rises in spring after the long night of winter. You might feel that rhythm even now. The body rests heavy, surrendered to stillness, yet the spirit holds a quiet thread of expectation. What seems final is not final. What seems gone is not gone. Beneath the soil, beneath the silence, life waits with patience. In this way, Sheol was both a warning and a comfort. A warning, for all must enter it. A comfort, for none enter it alone. And in the stillness, there was always the possibility that silence itself would one day be broken. So imagine lying upon sacred ground, with no judgment and no striving. The world above continues its noise, but here, all is leveled. You do not fall into darkness, you rest into stillness. And perhaps, in that stillness, the seed of renewal is quietly held. The Gnostic eons, and the return to light. The Gnostics spoke of the soul not as something bound, but as something hidden, a spark, faint yet eternal, waiting for its return. It was not the body they trusted, nor the world of matter, but the secret memory of light that lived within every being. For them to die was not to vanish. It was to remember, to awaken, to rise. The cosmos, in their vision, was layered in vast steps. Above and beyond the material world stretched the pleroma, the fullness of divine being, radiant and whole. From this infinite source came emanations, the eons. Each eon carried an aspect of the divine. Some were wisdom, some were truth, some were the very pulse of silence. Together they formed the hierarchy of light, pure expressions of what could not be grasped in earthly form. Yet the Gnostics also told of a rupture. One eon, Sophia, wisdom yearned to create without her partner, to reach beyond what was permitted. In that reaching, in that fall, matter itself was born. The imperfect world, heavy with shadow, was the consequence. Here, souls were trapped. Here, sparks forgot their origin. And so, the human journey was cast into a kind of exile, a long passage through ignorance. For the faithful, salvation was not offered in ritual sacrifice or public creed. It was hidden in gnosis, knowledge. Not ordinary knowledge, but a remembering of what had been forgotten. When a person awakened, they discovered themselves not as flesh and dust but as divine essence, veiled in a temporary shell. The body was a cloak, but the soul belonged to the heights. In this way, death became a crossing. The soul, once freed from the body, began its ascent. But this ascent was not simple. The heavens were guarded by archons, rulers of the spheres, powers who sought to hold the soul back. Each archon demanded recognition. Each veil of the cosmos required secret knowledge, passwords, or sacred names. Without them, the spark would be turned again toward Earth, drawn back into the cycle of birth and forgetting. The Gnostic texts, fragile, buried, almost lost, speak of these journeys. The Apocryphon of John describes the emanations, the eons, and the rulers who hold sway over matter. The Pistis Sophia tells of the soul's trials, the pleadings of wisdom, and the rescue offered by the higher Christ. For those who studied these mysteries, the path was clear. To die was to return, to awaken was to rise. You may imagine yourself now, as they once did, as a spark breaking loose from its husk. At the first breath after death, the heaviness of flesh falls away. You rise. The stars are no longer above you, they are thresholds. One by one, you pass them. Each gate asks you a question. Each realm demands that you remember where you came from. The eons above do not test. They call, they draw the spark, upward, back into the rhythm of the divine. In their presence, there is no punishment, no endless fire. There is only correction, realignment, healing. That which was scattered is gathered again. What fell into time is restored to timelessness. 4. The Gnostics, even the story of Christ was not only about history, but about this cosmic rescue. Christ was the emissary of the pleroma, descending into matter not to rule it, but to awaken those trapped within. His parables and words were veiled codes, maps of ascent. His sacrifice was not just an act of love, but a breach in the walls of ignorance, a doorway through which sparks could rise. It is striking to consider how different this vision was from the mainstream faiths around them. Where others saw judgment, Gnostics saw memory. Where others spoke of eternal division, they spoke of return. The greatest sin was not disobedience, but forgetfulness. And salvation was not in obedience, but in awakening, as the soul ascended. The archons could no longer hold it. Names of power, whispered like passwords, opened the way. Each veil gave way to the next, until at last there was no separation, no barrier, no distance. The spark was not judged, but welcomed. The spark was not measured, but embraced. It had always belonged to the light, and in returning, It did not become something new. It simply remembered what it had always been. The eons in this vision were not faraway gods, but living truths. They were love, knowledge, wisdom, life, radiant steps of being. To pass through them was not to meet strangers, but to return to forgotten kin. And beyond them, in the pleroma, was fullness. Not a throne, not a court, only light beyond limit, a stillness deeper than time, a wholeness in which every exile ended. You may feel the quiet of that vision, a world in which death is not a wound, but a homecoming, where each person, no matter how lost, carries within them a piece of eternity. And you may sense why this teaching was feared, why it was silenced, why the scrolls were buried. For to say that every soul carried the spark of the divine was to say that no ruler, no power, no priest could claim ownership of it. Yet the words survived, faint but enduring. In desert caves, in hidden jars, in broken parchment, sewn back together, the Gnostic vision breathes again. And with it, the promise that the spark is never truly lost. The soul rises, the eons unfold, the barriers dissolve, and the spark returns, quietly, gently, to the light that waits. It is here, in this return, that the Gnostics placed their hope, not in a kingdom built on earth, not in fear of punishment, but in the certainty that what is divine in you will find its way back to the divine itself. And so the journey ends, not with fire, nor with silence, but with a remembering. The spark shines, the spark rises, the spark returns. Closing reflection. All paths lead to silence, from the deserts of Egypt to the wide rivers of Mesopotamia, from the forests of Europe to the distant temples of the East. Every people carved their own horizon of meaning. They shaped their gods in stone, their myths in song, their prayers in smoke and fire. Each culture imagined a different gate beyond death, a different journey of the soul. Yet beneath those differences, a single truth lingered. The soul was never thought to be lost, even when names for the divine changed, even when rituals diverged. The pulse of belief carried the same echo. Death was not erasure. It was not nothingness. It was a crossing, a passage into silence that was alive with memory, whether through the weighing of the heart, the turning of the wheel, or the ascent into light. Each path spoke to the same longing that what breathes within you is not extinguished, but continues. Think of the Egyptian weighing of the heart, where every action, every secret thought, was balanced against the feather of truth. Or the Norse vision of the soul carried into halls of feast and flame. Or the Buddhist teaching of release, of dissolving into a quiet beyond craving. Across oceans and centuries, the details shift, but the intention does not. All are ways of saying, you matter. Your life is not swallowed by the void. The Gnostics spoke of a spark returning to its source. The Persians envisioned a bridge, where every step revealed the weight of one's deeds. The Greeks spoke of shadowed meadows, the Romans of honored shades, the Hindus of endless cycles. Each story carried its people through nights of fear and mornings of uncertainty, softening the unknown with meaning. You may picture these visions not as contradictions, but as constellations. Each one shines, with its own pattern, but all turn in the same sky. From the deserts to the mountains, from the open sea to the hidden cave. Humanity has always looked at death and whispered the same truth. It cannot undo what is eternal, and so you sit with these echoes now. The stories do not compete, they rest beside one another, like rivers flowing into the same wide ocean. Some are turbulent, others calm, yet all meet in the same silence. The silence is not empty. It is full, full of those who have gone before, full of the prayers whispered into soil and stone, full of the rhythm of lives lived and released. It is the silence of continuity, not of loss, the silence of return. As you breathe, you carry that silence within you. With every rise and fall of the chest, you embody what those before you sought: continuity, connection, belonging. You are not apart from their stories. You are part of them. Each myth, each rite, each belief was an attempt to say what you already know, deep inside, that the end is not the end. Now, as night folds around you, the echoes soften. You feel the weight of centuries ease into quiet. The pharaohs and poets, the sages and storytellers, the priests and wanderers, all of them rest now, as you do. Their voices become whispers. Their myths become breath. And what remains is silence. Not the silence of forgetting, but the silence of return. The silence of oceans at night. The silence of mountains beneath stars. The silence that is not absence, but presence too wide to be spoken. You carry it with you as sleep drapes over you, as dreams begin their gentle weaving. The stories do not vanish, they drift with you. And in that drifting, you become part of them. All paths, all prayers, all visions, they lead here. To stillness, to silence, to a continuation without fear. And in that silence, you rest.